Hiruzen Sarutobi took another deep, slow inhale of his pipe and exhaled it, the plume of smoke rising to the ceiling. It had been a stressful night, and he felt the tobacco was well-deserved. Not that I wouldn't still be enjoying it regardless, he thought. Interrupting his thoughts on self-indulgence was the feeling of a large and familiar presence incoming. He signaled to his ENBU behind him to open the window in preparation. The chakra he was feeling was significantly agitated. This wouldn't go well. In the blink of an eye, a man with a large frame and long white hair filled with spikes was standing rigidly in front of his desk. "Ah, Jiraiya. Welcome home. Has your research been going well?" Hiruzen questioned the Sannin with an even tone. "Cut the shit, sensei." Hiruzen didn't flinch at his student's response outwardly, but the words had their effect. He knew Jiraiya would be in a bad mood, but he was in more trouble than he had initially thought. "Very well. You may see the boy as soon as we are done here, but first I would like to brief you detail. His circumstances are extenuating and difficult. He's been living alone the last year and a half. The orphanage refused to take care of him properly anymore. The villagers still see him as less than human, not able to look underneath the underneath, and many of the shinobi are still bitter towards him." With each sentence the Hokage spoke, Jiraiya tightened up more and more, shoulders rigid, flexing his hands into fists. His jaw muscles rippled in agitation, and his breath was escaping his nose in noisy bursts, not unlike an enraged bull. A lesser man would have seen the rage building in such an imposing man, a shinobi renowned across the elemental nations, and shied away. The third Hokage pressed on in a steady and calm tone, one that did not betray his true feelings. Despite the village's hatred being poured onto him without reason, the boy continues to be as warm as the sun towards anybody who will acknowledge him. His resilience and determination are astounding. He has even decided he wants to become the Hokage. Hiruzen smiled softly. At that, Jiraiya lost just a little bit of tension, head tilting the slightest degree to question the Hokage on how that came to pass. Lesser shinobi, those below the Jonin level, would have been unlikely to even see the movement. Sarutobi saw it, interpreted it, and prepared an answer for it without a moment's hesitation. He sees how the higher-level shinobi are treated, and he sees the respect the office holds. It appears that instead of trying to return the village's hate through revenge, the boy wishes to avoid hate altogether, and instead become a shinobi worthy of the village's respect. Despite the strong pride Jiraiya felt in his chest at hearing about the goal of his godson, he cut his Hokage off with a sharp tone. He should already have their respect. He's supposed to be seen as a hero. That's what Minato wanted. That's what you told me Minato wanted, what he asked for in his dying breath, Hokage-sama. Jiraiya's voice level never raised, but instead became more rage-filled and intense as he spoke, before spitting out Hiruzen's title and honorific. Sarutobi, a man who was tempered, tried, and tested by 3 great shinobi wars, countless smaller battles and skirmishes, and decades in the office of the Hokage, flinched at it. A visible reaction from the Hokage at all was unheard of. A visible reaction that even a civilian could spot was tantamount to unthinkable. For a split second, Hiruzen Sarutobi, the god of shinobi, professor and Hokage of the greatest of the 5 elemental nations, reeled at his student's words. Not even at the ceasefire of the 3rd Great Shinobi War had the Tsuchikage spoken to him with such disdain and disrespect. Hiruzen took a silent, deep breath and looked the Toad Sage in the eye. He knew he deserved it, so he didn't even think to reprimand Konoha's spymaster. "I'm taking over as his guardian," Jiraiya said. "I will not allow Minato and Kushina's legacy to be tossed to the side like trash. He deserves the love that they would have given him, to be raised how they would have wanted him to be raised. He deserves to be seen as the hero that they wanted him to be, and I'll be damned if he won't get it." The Sandaime had never seen his spiky-haired student speak with such intensity or passion before. Not when he talked about his research and novels, not when he talked about bringing his traitorous teammate back or taking him down, not when he spoke of his love for his favorite incognito medic, not even when he revealed to Hiruzen that he had set his sights on bringing peace to the ninja world. The Hokage sighed, and in the duration of that short breath, he made up his mind. The council and elders will not be happy. They think it's good for the boy. Danzo believe. A large amount of killing intent cut him off, and he saw fire burning in the Toad Sage's eyes. Damn the council, damn the elders, and especially damn Danzo. I'll send them all to early funerals myself if I have to. They don't deserve to even speak of him, let alone make decisions about his life. Not when Minato sacrificed his life for them. Hiruzen silently thanked himself for dismissing his ANBU and sealing the room off before they started their discussion. A lesser man would be accused of treason for those words. A lesser man would have killed them already. Jiraiya shot back coldly. After a few seconds of silent acknowledgement to that statement, Hiruzen questioned his bull-headed student. And what of your spy network? I'll need more help from the ANBU and a few higher-level Jonin, but I can take him on travels to allied and safer countries. And when my travels take me to more volatile regions, I'll arrange for somebody to watch over him. That's a hefty price to ask of your village, Jiraiya. Jiraiya wanted to be mad at that statement, to fuel the flames of his anger, having had the village ask more of him than it rightfully should have, but his rage had started to cool as his sensei started to give in. The Sandaime had sacrificed more of his fair share for the village himself, including his wife and more than one son. I wasn't asking. Despite settling down, Jiraiya still had not forgiven. The Hokage had lost all bargaining chips earlier in the night when the boy had been involved in the incident. He had been left in charge of him after all. He had promised he'd take care of him. Promised Minato. Very well, I will allow you free rein when it comes to his life from now on. Just keep me in the loop and I will hold off the council the best I can. If you can't hold them off entirely, I will kill them. All of them, elders included. I wasn't joking or boasting. Jiraiya's statement was said with finality, and Hiruzen realized just how serious he was. Jiraiya, you know I would have to intervene and stop you unless you had sufficient evidence and reason. Sarutobi reasoned. Assuming I'd cooled down enough not to take you down with them, I would defect, on my honor, as the Toad Sage of Mount Myaboku. Hiruzen was, once again, taken aback by Jiraiya's words. Speaking of such things was treason, blatant treason, yet he couldn't find it in himself to even be upset at his student's words. In fact, if the roles were reversed, he could see himself uttering the same words. Not to mention the implication that Jiraiya believed he could win a fight against his sensei and Hokage. I see, Hiruzen replied somberly. Despite your words, I find myself not only okay with them, but agreeing with them. It seems I laxed in my retirement, and still haven't regained my edge since I was reinstated. Jiraiya knew those words were to manipulate him to feel for the old man and his situation, but he let them be. The fact that his sensei was even trying meant that he knew he had messed up. Jiraiya sighed. Sarutobi had tried to pass the hat off a little over 8 years ago, and had tasted retirement long enough to have grown accustomed to it. He knew he didn't want to take the hat back after the QB attack, but had to due to a lack of qualifying candidates. He knew that he felt as if he had failed by leading the village into the Third Great Shinobi War, failed by allowing Orochimaru turn traitor and escape the village, and now he felt he had failed his successor's legacy. Jiraiya's eyes softened a fraction. The old monkey deserved a break, and the Toad Sage would give it to him. Just not tonight. I don't want your excuses, sensei. I want to see my godson. Very well, I will take you to see him. Although he is likely still unconscious, his condition is stable. At the reminder that his favorite student's only son was in the hospital, Jiraiya's eyes hardened once more. And what of the perpetrators? Their heads were rolling even as the message was en route to you. The ENBU who were assigned to his protection detail too. Both of them. Jiraiya relaxed a small amount at that. He might have been angrier than he could ever remember, but he didn't feel like ripping anybody's spine out tonight, and he was happy to hear the Hokage hadn't lost as much of his sharp edge as he had thought. Hiruzen rose to lead his student out of the office after deactivating the privacy seals. The two turned to head out of the office through the doors, another action that showed the seriousness of Jiraiya. He hadn't used the doors in over 30 years, preferring the window due to how badass it is. As they headed out, Sarutobi stole a look at the pictures of the Hokage on the wall by the door, specifically at Minato's. He had failed the village, his sensei, the previous Hokage, and the will of fire that he had inherited from him, failed his student, and failed his successor. It was due time that he rectified that. All of it. Jiraiya, I am sorry. You have shown me how I have failed. I will make it up to you. That is a promise. Jiraiya's eyes softened, almost to their normal state. Thank you, sensei. He threw a punch at the elderly Hokage, just for old time's sake. Hiruzen leaned back, not even moving his hands from where they were clasped behind his back, and dodged the punch, more out of habit and instincts than anything. But I'm still angry, and you owe me one. Hiruzen smiled lightly for the first time that night. I expected nothing less from you, Jiraiya. You have the dead of the Hokage's office to call upon whenever you wish. Naruto awoke in the hospital to hushed whispers. In his experience, hushed whispers were never happy words. Not that it bothered him. He had learned not to be bothered by such boring things at a young age. Instead of conveying all this, he sat up suddenly and shot the medic Nin a devious grin. That earned him a scowl, which he laughed off. A few minutes of having his body checked over with more hushed whispers and mutters that he didn't have the time to pay attention to, and the door swung open on creaky hinges. On the other side, he saw the Hokage followed by a large, serious-looking man with white hair who he'd never seen before, but yet he still felt familiar. Naruto's grin turned into a real smile. Hey Gigi. The old Hokage wore a genuine smile himself. Naruto, my boy, how are you feeling? I feel great, although I'm not sure why I'm wrapped up like a mummy. Jiraiya couldn't hold his scoff in. Sarutobi had given the damage report on the way over, and he was pissed. There's no need to lie, kid. Naruto jumped at the accusation. Literally, the 7.5-year-old leapt up onto his feet on the hospital bed and started bouncing up and down, shaking his fist at Jiraiya. The whole time, who are you calling a liar? I feel perfectly normal. I don't even know why I'm in this stupid hospital in the first place. Jiraiya again scoffed at Naruto. Brat, you broke all 4 limbs, both hands, 8 ribs, your left collarbone and orbital, and your nose. Naruto paused at that and became still for the first time since they entered the room. He tilted his head like he was trying to remember, then suddenly asked, "What's an orbital, old man?" The orbital is the bone around your eye, Naruto-kun. It's very difficult to break. The Hokage replied to him with a smile. The boy's unpredictability never ceased to amaze him. Oh, sorry, old man, I was talking to the other old man, not you. I must be pretty awesome to have broken it, though. The matter-of-factness that Naruto said this with set an already tense and sensitive Jiraiya over the edge. Who are you calling old, you little runt? Do you know who I am? You're way too weak to be talking to me that way. Jiraiya leaned forwards toward Naruto in frustration. Hiruzen sighed at the stubbornness of Jiraiya, knowing Naruto was his equal in that aspect. This could get ugly. Who are you calling weak? I'm gonna be the Hokage someday. I could take you on right here, right now, believe it. Naruto leaned forward toward Jiraiya in anger, butting his forehead against Jiraiya's strange forehead protector. The two butted heads for a few seconds, on the verge of having steam pour out of their ears, before cooler heads prevailed. Or rather, a cooler head. Now, Naruto, I'm not sure you're ready to take on one of my students just yet. Naruto backed off at that, but didn't back down all the way. Instead, he eyed Jiraiya as if he was trying to see what he was made of. Jiraiya leaned back and put his hands on his hips, smiling, thinking that his sensei had put his stubborn godson in his place. I think I could take him, Gigi. His hair is even whiter than yours. The toad sage sweat dropped at that. After a few seconds of feeling bad for himself, Jiraiya started chuckling, which caused the Hokage to start himself. Naruto looked on incredulously at the fact that he wasn't being taken seriously. He truly believed he could win against the white-haired man. I have to say, Sensei was spot on with his descriptions of you. Jiraiya's tone softened. Seriously, Naruto, how are you feeling? Past anger and frustration forgotten in the sincerity of the large man's tone, Naruto smiled sheepishly and rubbed the back of his head. I feel fine. A little sore and a little confused. Actually, a lot of confused. Why am I here? You were beaten up by some drunk villagers. They did quite a number on you before one of our jonin stopped them. Kakashi had actually done more than stop them. In fact, Sarutobi thought the swift execution they were given might have been merciful considering the injuries Kakashi had inflicted in his rage. Yeah, I remember that. Naruto looked down in embarrassment for a second before looking back up and questioning, but the grumpy fox told me he was going to heal me completely, and I feel fine, so why am I here? Hearing his reply, the two older men's eyes steeled, and the atmosphere took on a more serious edge. Hiruzen yet again found himself silently thanking the privacy seals he had put in place. He didn't need even more rumors spreading about Naruto and the nine-tailed fox, Kyuubi no Kitsune. It was Jiraiya who responded, "What fox, kid?" "The big grumpy one in the sewer. Or I guess he said he was in my head. Why does my head have a sewer in it?" Another soft smile from the Hokage at the child's innocence and unpredictability. Jiraiya again was the one to speak. "You spoke with the fox?" "More like yelled at, and then shouted with. He kept yelling at me, calling me weak. So I said, if I'm so weak, how come you're the one stuck behind bars in my sewer head? And he roared at me and called me dumb, so I roared back and called him ugly. He was really grumpy the whole time, so I was grumpy right back with him. And eventually he said he would heal me, so I wouldn't die." Naruto said the last sentence with a prideful smirk on his face. Jiraiya was thinking that just maybe, he should feel a little bit of empathy for the demon fox that attacked his village. Awfully nice of such a grumpy old fox. I think he was just pretending so he'd look scary though. By the time the almost 8-year-old had finished talking, he was out of breath, and so nearly were the two older shinobi he was talking to. Jiraiya shot the Hokage a questioning glance, and then another. He was returned with a shake of the head to indicate he didn't know Naruto had made contact with the fox, and a single nod, giving him permission to talk with the young Jinchuriki about it. "Naruto, do you know what that fox is?" The blonde shook his head. "That's the nine-tailed demon, the one who attacked the village 7.5 years ago." Jiraiya informed him somberly. A few seconds of thinking and Naruto had his response. "Nice try, old man. He's not a demon. He's just a really big fox. I might be young, and I might be dumb, but I'm super smart, so you can't trick me." Jiraiya just shook his head at that, not really knowing what to say. Naruto continued to question, why did he even attack the village in the first place? And why is he so grumpy and sad? "What do you mean sad, kid?" Naruto became much more reserved, sitting back down and staring into his lap. The big fox was really sad, although I could tell he was trying to hide it. "How do you know he was sad? And how do you know he was trying to hide it?" The look in the young boy's eyes said it all. He knew he was sad because he knew what that sadness was. Born from the hatred that thousands of people, entire villages drop onto your shoulders. He knew he was hiding it behind his anger because he himself hid his sadness, and being angry was one of the best ways to do it. Jiraiya's eyes softened to their maximum amount and got shiny. To his left, the Hokage coughed into a fist uncomfortably. Jiraiya put a hand on Naruto's head and ruffled his unkempt blonde hair. "I see." After an unbearable few seconds of seeing his godson hollowed by sadness, Jiraiya tried to cheer him up. "Seigaki, you said you wanted to be Hokage, right?" Naruto nodded, picking up a small smile thinking of his dream. "How about I help? You know of the fourth Hokage, right?" Naruto was excited now. "Yeah. He's my hero. I want to be just like him, only better." "That's a lot to live up to, kid. You're gonna need a heck of a teacher." Sadness seeped back into the boy. Jiraiya scowled internally at the boy's past experiences. "How about I take you under my wing and be your teacher?" At this, Naruto's grin was unmistakable. "Are you a good teacher?" The question was innocent and mostly curious, so Jiraiya returned a grin just as big. "Kid, I'm probably the best teacher ever. I'm Jiraiya of the Sannin, the gallant toad sage of Mount Myaboku." Jiraiya sung in conjunction with his flamboyant kabuki dance. "Whoa, sorry, I don't know what any of that means," Naruto said sheepishly. "Let's put it this way, kid. The fourth Hokage, your hero? I was his sensei." Naruto's eyes became as big as ramen bowls, and his jaw hung open in amazement. "Whoa, you trained the Yondaime? Does that mean you're super strong? Can you teach me cool jutsu? Can you breathe fire like Sasuke? Can you teach me how to? Can you make me strong enough to beat Jiji?" Both of the veteran shinobi were chuckling at the excitement of the young boy, possibly remembering a time when they were also wide-eyed youngsters. "I can't promise that last one, but if you promise to work hard, I can definitely make you into a great ninja that the Yondaime, fourth Hokage, would have been proud to have in his village." Hearing that, Naruto's eyes somehow got even bigger and much wetter. He rubbed them on the back of his arm and noticeably tried to keep them from leaking. "Hey, it looks like you already know one of the shinobi rules. A shinobi never cries, because it won't get him anywhere," Jiraiya said, and Naruto nodded. "Can I tell you a secret though? Just between you and me? Another nod. It's okay to cry when you're happy. I've even seen the Hokage, both third and fourth, do it before. Naruto looked up at him in awe and nodded again. The tears silently started spilling out of his eyes. Sarutobi looked on, seeing a boy who had known so much sadness and hate, and had shouldered such a large burden for the good of the village. Crying tears of happiness brought a warm feeling into his heart. Hope. He hadn't seen Jiraiya like this since Minato's death. He himself hadn't felt this light since before he reclaimed the hat. Maybe this little blonde ball of excitement would be the thing that will bring the village together and take them to new heights. Maybe, despite his failure, the child would turn out exactly how Minato would have wanted. It was clear as day that he had inherited the will of fire. Maybe, just maybe, he would achieve his dream and become Hokage. Jiraiya was thinking similar thoughts. He had vowed not to take another student, and this boy had convinced him, had him excited even, to become his teacher without even asking, with nothing more than his infectious attitude. He thought he would be filled with regret seeing Naruto after what happened, knowing that he could have prevented it. Instead, he too felt hope. Hope that this boy would inherit his will of fire too. Hope that this boy who claimed the QB, 9 tails, was hiding sadness, and stood up to the demon at 7 and roared back would maybe, just maybe, be the one to end the cycle of hatred and bring peace to the shinobi world. Naruto stood at the main gate, feeling both excited and sad. He loved the Leaf Village. His village. He would miss his grandfatherly figure in the Hokage's office. He would miss the new sensei they got in the academy this year, the one who yelled at him a lot for not paying attention or for the few pranks he had played in class. He didn't have the feeling of hate directed at him though like the rest of the village did, just sadness and maybe a little frustration. And he would miss Ichiraku ramen, the best ramen in the whole wide world, which he was sure of despite never having left the village walls. More importantly, he would miss the people within the shop, Tucci and Ayam. They too looked at him with sadness in their eyes, but they always smiled at them and asked how he was. Naruto always gave them his biggest and best smile right back and told them he was doing great. And how could he not be when he was about to chow down on the greatest version of the best food ever invented? It wasn't like when he was in his apartment alone and the sadness tried to overcome him. Sadness. There was so much sadness around him and in him. Did he make people sad? Was he the reason that even the people who were nice to him looked so sad? He couldn't remember ever having done anything wrong. Maybe he was doing something that he didn't even notice. He would have to pay closer attention to himself and what he was doing. Naruto was brought out of his thoughts by the reason he was excited. Jiraiya, the old white-haired man. What had he called himself? Sannin? Toad Sage? Naruto still didn't know what either of those things meant. Obviously, he knew what a toad was, but what was a sage? And he knew what Sannin meant, but what did it mean to be one of 3 ninja? Weren't there way more than 3 in the Leaf Village? Who were the other 2? Were they also old? He was interrupted by the tall man yet again, this time not by his presence, but by the question that came from behind him. Ready to go, Gaki? Naruto spun on his heel, instantly mad about being called a brat. He hadn't done anything to earn that name. At least not around Jiraiya he hadn't. Who are you calling a brat, old man? Sure, he wasn't as old as the Hokage. He couldn't be if he was trained by him, but he was still one of the oldest ninja Naruto had seen, and his hair was completely white. Jiraiya was perplexed. Naruto spun around like he was surprised to see him, not surprising since he had snuck up on him silently. Yet when he turned around, Naruto just looked angry, not surprised. He'd have to check that out later. Instead of showing his surprise, Jiraiya just chuckled at Naruto. He couldn't help himself. His quick temper and developing wit reminded him of another Uzumaki he had known. Okay, Naruto, calm down so we can get going. Where's the rest of your stuff? Naruto was confused by that question. He had just about everything he owned in his backpack. Both his spare set of clothes and his pajamas fit in there easily, and he even added in a few cups of instant ramen. Never could be too careful. It's all in my backpack. His confused tone betrayed his thoughts. Jiraiya felt rage boil deep inside him yet again. Maybe he should make a trip to the council and lop a few heads off. It was early morning. He still had time after all. I was just asking so I could show you the first of many things you'll be learning as my apprentice. Naruto lit up at that, which he loved to see, but he still felt guilty. He still hadn't told him he was his godfather. How could he after seeing how he lived? The kid would probably hate him after that. Best to wait till they made it back to the village in a few years. Jiraiya pulled out a basic storage scroll, one of his own making, and showed it to Naruto. Naruto balked at this a bit, thinking he was going to see a super cool new jutsu that would help him become Hokage. Instead, this old man pulled out a scroll. Maybe he was starting to lose it. It's just a scroll? He questioned. Oh ho, but just watch what it does. Here, hand me your backpack. Naruto thought about it for a second. He didn't want to give up his ramen, but the Toad Man seemed pretty certain and even excited. Plus, he had called him his apprentice. That means he would buy him ramen if he destroyed his current stock, right? He slid his backpack off and handed it over. Jiraiya took the backpack and slung open the scroll and laid it on the ground with a smoothness and ease that showed his wealthy experience. He put the backpack on the middle of the scroll where Naruto saw a bunch of scribbling in a vaguely organized pattern. Jiraiya put 2 fingers on a certain part of the scribbles, and suddenly his backpack disappeared in a puff of smoke. Jiraiya was showing off a bit, making a storage scroll seem like a super complex technique, but he was only human, and he wanted to see the smile on his godson's face. He put 2 fingers on the scroll, looked up at Naruto, and channeled his chakra to activate the scroll. He felt more than saw that the backpack was gone, sealed away into the scroll. He was looking at Naruto's face, and could see the wheels turning in his head. Here it comes, he thought with a mental chuckle. You jerk. Naruto ground out. I had ramen in there, and now it's just gone. There were 8 cups in there. That's almost 2 full meals. You better be replacing those. That was not what Jiraiya had been expecting. Hilarious as Naruto's reaction was, he could feel the threat in his voice, and while he was 20 years too young to even consider beating him in a fight, he could still make his life hell on the road. Jiraiya threw his hands up in defense. Whoa, just take it easy there, big guy. Nobody has to get hurt. This is a storage scroll, and one that I made myself, perfectly I might add. The backpack and your precious ramen have just been stored in the scroll. All you have to do is channel some chakra here. He pointed to the part of the seal that controlled the rest of it. And think about your backpack coming out. Your chakra is a part of you and will respond to your thoughts. In truth, using a sealing scroll was even less complicated than that, but giving him some chakra theory lessons without him knowing it wouldn't hurt him. Naruto's eyebrows furrowed at the instructions, and his mouth scrunched to one side in concentration. Finally, he relented and asked, How do I channel chakra, Jiraiya-sensei? Jiraiya felt a great amount of pride swell up within him, and not just at being called sensei for the first time. It was clear that Naruto had tried his best to figure this out on his own, had tried to think through how the scroll worked, and maybe even the different ways that he could use it. He was already looking underneath the underneath, even if it was just a little. Well, my precious student, that received a smile from Naruto, whose face had still been mostly contorted in concentration. Have you learned how to access your chakra? Naruto's eyes looked upward like he was trying to remember, and then he looked back at Jiraiya and nodded. Good, then think about it like this. You want to start molding or accessing your chakra. Then you want to slowly feel it moving down your arm and pushing out of your fingertips. As I said before, chakra will respond to your will. It's not just a part of you. It is you. But since you're not experienced with it, it could take some time. Why don't you give it a shot? Naruto nodded and sat down cross-legged in front of the scroll. He brought his hands up in front of his chest in the ram seal and started to access his chakra. Jiraiya-sensei had called it molding. He liked that better. It just felt right. He didn't really feel any change, but he could feel his chakra swirling, so he let go of the seal and placed 2 fingers where Jiraiya had shown him and tried to push his chakra out through his fingers. The feeling was instant, like a wind rushing through an open window, and suddenly there was a loud pop, and apprentice and student were surrounded by a large cloud of smoke larger than an elephant. Coughing and waving his hand in front of his face as the smoke dissipated, Jiraiya informed his student, Little too much chakra there, Gaki, but we can work on your control later. Naruto was only half listening. He was more focused on the ramen in the backpack that he was currently hugging and protecting like his life depended on it. To be fair, in Naruto's mind, his life did depend on it. This was ramen. After a few seconds of his precious reunion with the lifeblood that fuels future Hokage, Naruto realized what happened. Whoa, Sensei, I did it. Can you store other things in the scrolls? You said you made this one. Can you teach me how to do that? Can you store people in the scrolls? What about chakra? What about buildings? A tree? Can I store my arm in one? Jiraiya was increasingly perplexed by Naruto's questions. Unpredictable was an understatement, but he was content with the curiosity the boy showed. And he learned to channel his chakra out of his fingers in no time flat for it being his first go at it. He would make a fine shinobi one day, of that Jiraiya was sure. Maybe even a great Hokage too. Ho ho ho, slow your roll there, Blondie. We can get all those questions answered on the road, but we should get going so we don't waste too much time. Plus, you probably alerted the ENBU with that giant cloud of smoke, so we should get going to ease their nerves. Have you said bye to everybody you wanted to? Jiraiya kicked himself a little even as he asked the question, knowing he had very few people he could interact with in a positive way. The boy didn't look upset or sad as he had expected, though, just like he was in thought. I saw Tucci and I am at breakfast this morning. I didn't get to say bye to Gigi or Irika-sensei, though. He thought the Hokage would be too busy to say bye to. Plus, he had seen him last night when he had gotten him out of the hospital. He wasn't sure if he knew Irika-sensei well enough to say bye to him, or even if Irika actually liked him, but now he wished he had gone to see him. Well, we'll be back before you know it, kid, so why don't we get going? Naruto nodded at that. He didn't want to disturb them anyway. The two spiky-haired leaf citizens walked up to the checkout desk, where a couple of newly minted Chunin were on watch duty. Jiraiya checked them out, showing the scroll from the Hokage that gave Naruto permission to leave, and the two started walking through the gate. They had made it about 20 yards when Naruto felt the Hokage behind him. He whirled around and ran at the older man, tackling him with a hug. The elderly Hokage held his ground and returned the hug. Naruto, you would leave without saying goodbye to your old grandfather figure? My old bones could barely carry me this far out of the village to come find you. Naruto scoffed at this. Old man, you're the Hokage. That means you're the strongest in the village. That old person act won't fool me. Naruto harumphed, crossing his arms in stubbornness. My Naruto, not much gets by you, does it? Naruto nodded. Except maybe the presence of your favorite academy teacher? Sarutobi rotated to give Naruto a view of the man standing behind him. Irika-sensei, what are you doing here? Naruto was shocked, but beyond happy to see him. That meant that Irika really did care about him. One more person to add to his list. Now, Naruto, you didn't think that I'd let one of my favorite students leave without saying goodbye, did you? Irika leaned in close to whisper in his ear, and just between you and me, I think you might be my favorite out of all the other students. You can't tell them I said that, though. Naruto nodded very seriously and whispered back, Don't worry, sensei. Your secret is safe with me. His voice grew louder. A great shinobi never reveals secrets, and I'm going to be the very best. It's going to take a lot of work to become the best ninja and Hokage Naruto, and you'll have to listen carefully and learn from Jiraiya whenever he's speaking and pay close attention to his actions to learn from those too. Naruto didn't look sad at the news of how hard it would be. His chin was up and his chest was puffed out. He looked determined. But I can see that you already know that. I have no doubt that you can do it, Naruto. Irika donned a happy smile thinking about it. I believe in you completely. Naruto was shocked at this. He had only known Irika-sensei for half a year, and here was saying he believed he could become the Hokage someday. His eyes started to water for the second time in as many days. Jiraiya had told him it was okay to cry out of happiness, but he still tried to hold it back. It wouldn't do for the future Hokage to be seen crying every single day. The three shinobi of Konoha, Leaf, looked at the young boy with melancholy. Such a young boy shouldn't be so overwhelmed emotionally at what amounted to a fairly small gesture. Every young child should have somebody to believe in their dreams. It was unfair. This is my doing, Hiruzen thought, and he could barely stomach that fact. Never again will I allow my inattentiveness to harm this village or anybody in it. Hiruzen interrupted Naruto's emotions before he could let waterworks begin. Naruto, I wanted to give you this. Sarutobi held out a cylindrical tube for him. He had decided last night that it was time the boy knew, and he had been up until the sunrise compiling everything he could for him. That contains a storage scroll. Everything in that scroll is yours. Naruto took the scroll and looked it over. The end caps of the tube were red and had a swirling pattern on them, like he'd seen on the vests of some of the older shinobi around the village. The tube itself was also red, with black scribbles that looked kinda like the ones on the inside storage scroll that Jiraiya had given him. Gigi, what are these black scribbles? Jiraiya hadn't told him exactly what they were, just how to work that scroll. Those Naruto are characters for Fuinjutsu, sealing techniques. When you combine them together, like that, they make a sealing formula. It's an old and complex art that's very difficult. Not many shinobi practice Fuinjutsu these days. Lucky for you, Jiraiya here is likely the foremost practitioner in the elemental nations. Naruto looked at the toad sage in awe. Jiraiya just shrugged. He was nothing special compared to Minato or Kushina. This specific formula is called a blood seal. Only the people who have blood that is recognized by the formula will be able to open it. Hiruzen had found the old tubing in a box full of Kushina's stuff that he kept in storage. It was an Uzumaki scroll holder. The seal on it would only open to those with Uzumaki blood. Luckily, it hadn't been sealed yet. So Hiruzen had gathered what he had wanted to give Naruto and sealed it in a scroll, then sealed the scroll in the tubing. Now only Naruto or Tsunade, to his knowledge, could open it. Jiraiya will show you how to open it later. I'm sure you're excited to get going on your trip. You bet, old man. By the time I get back, I'll be strong enough to take that hat right off your head. Hiruzen and Iruka chuckled at this, which frustrated Naruto for a second before he too joined in. Naruto, I actually have something that I wanted to give you as well, if you'd take it. Naruto once again was taken aback by this. Iruka had surprised him twice now. Maybe he needed to start paying closer attention to people he was around. Iruka reached into his pocket and pulled out a leaf. It looked like any leaf that he had seen fluttering about the village, about the same size too, small enough to fit in even his 7.5-year-old palm. This one, however, looked like it was made out of clay that had been hardened and painted the correct shade of green. He didn't really need a paperweight, but he took it from Iruka anyway and bowed as he thanked him. I know it's not as interesting as a storage scroll or as cool as a sword or anything like that, but I thought it would be a reminder of home for you. You could look at it after a long day of training and remember why you're doing it. Remember what your goals are and the people you're trying to get strong enough to protect and the village that you will one day be the leader of. Iruka said with a growing smile. He didn't know how or even why, but this little blonde student of his had wormed his way into his heart and taken root there, and he suspected there was no way of getting him out. It was all too much for Naruto. His eyes watered again. But this time he couldn't stop the tears from falling, not that he was even trying anymore. The two people standing in front of him meant so much to him. They believed in him and were trying to help him. They gave him gifts. Nobody had ever given him a gift before, not even on his birthday. He would cherish both these gifts forever. He made up his mind right then and there. He would become Hokage, and yes, he would do it to gain acknowledgement from the people of the village, but that was secondary now. Now, he would gain the strength to protect the people that already acknowledged him, that believed in him, that he considered precious. That's why he would become Hokage, to protect his loved ones. Jiraiya put his hand on his shoulder. We should get going, Naruto. Naruto nodded and ran up to the Chunin and Hokage and did his best to hug both of them in his much too little arms. Thank you, both of you, so much. I promise I'll become the greatest ninja either of you have ever seen, he whispered to them. The determination in his voice was something that Sarutobi hadn't seen in most of his jonin. It was nearly impossible for an academy student. He could practically feel it. This boy was truly something else. Naruto stepped back away from them, his electric grin reappearing on his face in a more typical Naruto fashion. Gigi, Iruka-sensei, I'll see you when I get back. Old man, you better have that hat fitted for my size by then. And sensei, we can fight when I get back. I promise I won't beat you up too bad. Something else indeed, Hiruzen thought. You know, Naruto, Sarutobi finished with. I hear young Sasuke-kun also wants to be Hokage. You better work really hard if you're going to beat it. Naruto was distraught at hearing this and turned to his newly acquired teacher. Come on, Jiraiya-sensei, we gotta get going so you can start training me. I can't lose to Sasuke, he's a jerk. Naruto started tugging on Jiraiya's sleeve, trying to drag him along the road, much to the Sanin's amusement. He did turn over his shoulder and wave to the Hokage and his academy teacher one last time before turning back and marching away from the village in determination. Once he was out of earshot, Iruka leaned towards the Hokage. Forgive me, Sandaime-sama, Lord Third, but I haven't heard that Sasuke wants to be the Hokage. How did you find that out? Saratobi sported a knowing smile and let loose a chuckle, something he'd been doing a lot while around Naruto. I didn't, but Naruto doesn't know that, and a rivalry amongst young boys is a tried and true method to motivate them. Iruka didn't like keeping the truth from his students, but he supposed the third Hokage had a point. Toad Sage and Apprentice had made quite a headway to the southwest, and were setting up camp about 2 hours short of nightfall. Normally Jiraiya would keep moving until after sunset, but Naruto had a long and emotional day, not to mention an extremely rough night after being hospitalized. Still in the land of fire, they had plenty of trees for cover, and they made camp about a mile into the forest, far enough away from the road to avoid all but the very best sensors. They were in a small clearing, large enough to hold 2 tents and a small campfire, while still leaving enough room for Naruto to train if he was up for it. Jiraiya made 4 shadow clones to go set up a perimeter of seals and barriers. Never could be too careful. Upon seeing Jiraiya make the shadow clones, Naruto's eyes widened. Old man, you gotta teach me that jutsu. I bet I could kick Sasuke's butt with that. Well, Naruto, first, can you tell me the 3-man types of jutsu that shinobi use? Jiraiya asked. Well, there's ninjutsu. And, taijutsu was one I think, and, I can't remember the other. Naruto sheepishly rubbed the back of his head. He was sure that Iruka had gone over it in class, but it had seemed unimportant at the time. Now, he was embarrassed that he didn't know. You got the first 2 right, and the third one is Jinjutsu. Naruto nodded along like he was understanding this time, and interrupted before Jiraiya could continue. But what about that thing Gigi was talking about with the scroll, Fuinjutsu? He wasn't quite sure if that's what his grandfather figure had called it, but that sounded right. Very good, Naruto. Fuinjutsu is one of the jutsu types, but it's not one of the main 3. The 3 we labeled represent the 3 parts of a shinobi. Ninjutsu has to do with a shinobi's chakra, taijutsu a shinobi's body, and jinjutsu a shinobi's mind. Those are the things a shinobi can train in order to increase their abilities: mind, body, and chakra. It looked like Naruto was following along, so he continued. Fuinjutsu falls under mind. In order to get better at it, you must study and learn different ways that seals and formulas work. Just about anybody can apply a seal physically, but it's very hard to come up with them and make sure that they are properly done. Naruto donned what Jiraiya was calling his concentration face, yet again. Eyebrows furrowed and lips scrunched off to one side, usually the left. It seemed to mean that he was thinking, both deeply and carefully. Might as well pile it on, Jiraiya thought. It's not like we won't have plenty of time to go back over it later. He continued, there are other subcategories too, but we'll get into those tomorrow. Naruto was nearly overwhelmed. He never knew that being a shinobi was so complicated and had so many things to worry about. He better pay close attention, like Gigi said, and learn everything he could. Time for Jiraiya to get to the point. So, you want to learn the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique, that I just used? Bunshin, clones, are a form of ninjutsu, so you need to train your chakra before you can learn an advanced technique like that. As far as Naruto was concerned, training his chakra so that he could make more of himself was totally worth it. He wondered how many of himself he could make. Jiraiya cut off his train of thought. Now, there's 2 ways to train your chakra. You can either train your reserves, which I don't think will be a problem for you, or you can train your control, which, judging by your use of the scroll, is going to be the hardest aspect of your shinobi abilities. Jiraiya finished. Naruto was never one to be told he couldn't do something, so he instantly jumped on the defensive. What do you mean it's going to be the hardest? It sounds easy. You said chakra is just part of me, like an arm or a leg, right? Then I should be able to control it easily. While this was an oversimplification, Jiraiya was impressed with his thought process and reasoning skills. They weren't nearly as bad as what the reports from his 1.5 years at the academy said. It's not quite so easy, Gaki. Many shinobi train their whole lives and never master their chakra. Granted, most shinobi didn't live past 20, but Naruto didn't need to know that just yet. And to make things harder for you, you have an unusually large amount of chakra, and if my mediocre sensory abilities are right, your chakra pool is heavily made up of yang chakra. Naruto looked like he was going to ask a question, so Jiraiya cut him off. It was getting late, and he wanted the boy to get some training in. A lesson for another day, Naruto. Just know that yang chakra is really dense, and it seems like your chakra has about 10 times more than normal. That makes it much harder to control, coupled with the sheer amount that you have, and it's basically a nightmare scenario. You'll probably never be able to even do Jinjutsu. Naruto looked quite sad at this, and Jiraiya realized he was laying it on a little thick, and quickly added, "Don't you worry though. There hasn't been a Kage that's ever had a small amount of chakra. They all have more than you do right now. They just learned to control it through hard work and tons of practice." Naruto's smile returned. If that's all it took, then he would master his chakra in no time. "Alright, sensei, how do I practice my chakra control? It ain't gonna practice itself. And you know what? I'm gonna learn Jinjutsu someday. I don't care what you say even if you are my sensei, and even if you did train the yondaime. I know I can do it." Jiraiya chuckled at the young boy, something he'd found himself doing a lot, completely unaware that his own sensei had the exact same thought, not 8 hours earlier. The child just had a way of projecting his hope and determination onto those close to him. "Alright, Naruto, I'll tell you what. We'll work backwards. When you can complete this tree climbing exercise," Jiraiya began walking up a tree, body parallel to the ground. Much to Naruto's surprise, "I'll teach you the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique." The boy had more chakra than most jonin already, and it would only get bigger. Plus, he had a sneaking suspicion about the heavy amount of yang chakra in his system. He could handle the A-rank jutsu once he had a little control. But, before you can master tree walking, you must master the leaf clinging exercise. Jiraiya plucked a leaf from the tree he was walking up and faced Naruto. Jiraiya slid his toad sage headband up and pressed the leaf into his forehead and channeled chakra to it, not even having to think about having it cling, and when he removed his hand, the leaf stuck to it. Naruto knew this exercise well. Iruka had tried to get Choji, Hiba, Shikamaru, and himself to do it after class for causing a ruckus not that long ago. It had been the most boring 7 hours of his life. What Naruto didn't realize was that it had only been 3 minutes before he blew the leaf off his head and took off running. His attention span needed some work to say the least. Jiraiya saw the doubt in his eyes and went in for the kill. "You know, kid, when I was training the 4th Hokage, he could stick 100 leaves to his body while moving full speed." Granted, Minato had been almost 17, and it had been at the end of the training trip that he had taken as a Chunin with Jiraiya. It wouldn't hurt to add a little extra motivation for the kid, though. Naruto's eyes set in determination. He would have to be able to do 101 while he was moving if he wanted to be better than the yondaime then. Resolute, he moved to pick up a leaf, but stopped and questioned Jiraiya. "What about the scroll the old man gave me? Can you show me how to open it?" Jiraiya thought about this. Naruto had given him the scroll since he didn't have any way to carry it at the moment, so the Toad Sage had seen the Uzumaki crest and seal. He knew he would have to explain about his mother if the Sandaime didn't leave a letter in there to do it himself. This information could potentially be dangerous in the wrong hands. Dangerous to Naruto. Jiraiya made up his mind. "Sorry, kid. That'll have to wait until you can walk on the tree too. And before you ask, just know, I have my reasons for it, and you'll have to trust me." Considering that he had agreed to take Naruto on as his apprentice, Naruto thought trusting him on this seemed fair. Besides, he'd probably be running up and down the tree by nightfall tomorrow based off of how easily Jiraiya had done it. "Okay, sensei, I trust you." Naruto then grinned. "Just be ready to show me when I figure this out tomorrow." Jiraiya chuckled yet again. He noticed, though, as Naruto got to work, that he hadn't asked for any additional instructions on the control exercises. Oh well, when he gets frustrated and needs help, he'll ask, and Jiraiya would be happy to help him. Better to let him figure out what he can on his own, though, or at least try. With that, Jiraiya headed out to find them some food before it got too dark. Jiraiya returned to the clearing, a string of 6 small fish hanging from one hand, and boy was he surprised. Naruto was standing in the middle of camp, covered in leaves. Jiraiya counted 25 on his front side alone, but he hid his shock. He didn't want to give the boy a big head after all. "Sensei, look how many I can do. I'll catch up to the 4th in no time at all, haha." Jiraiya was about to ask how he had managed to do it so fast when 12 of the leaves fell off the blonde, and his posture relaxed. "Just kidding, hee. This is a lot harder than it looks." 13 or so of the leaves were still stuck to Naruto, which was confusing to Jiraiya. He questioned the boy, "If you were kidding, why are there still leaves stuck all over your body?" "Oh, These ones are clinging using the tried and true lick and stick method. Naruto demonstrated his words by picking up one of the fallen leaves, licking one side, and sticking it onto his skin. Now that Jiraiya looked, every leaf that was still attached was on exposed skin. So what about those? He pointed to the leaves that had fallen on the ground. Well, those are the ones that I stuck with my chakra. That was the training exercise, right, sensei? Jiraiya was once again surprised, but he still wasn't sure that Naruto had actually done it. Not that the exercise was difficult, but the boy wasn't even 8, and he clearly hadn't been able to do that many leaves when he had left. Why don't you peel off the stuck ones and show me how many you can stick with chakra? Naruto nodded and started picking off his lick and stick leaves. When he'd tossed them all to the side, he moved to a nearby tree and grabbed a handful of fresh leaves before coming back to Jiraiya. Naruto started to move to lay down before he was cut off by the Sannin. What are you doing there, Gaki? Getting the leaves in place, obviously, Old Man Naruto replied before laying all the way down on his back. He then started placing the leaves over his body in even increments until he had about 15 laid out. He closed his eyes and made his concentration face, willing his chakra to hold the leaves in place. When he felt that they were secured, he very slowly started to stand back up, doing his best not to disturb the leaves. After several seconds, he was standing, now grinning, in front of an uponly shocked Jiraiya. The Toad Sage couldn't believe it. The boy had just gained 2 leaves seemingly in between 2 different attempts, without failing even one time. This level of talent was generally classified as prodigious. He wouldn't go so far as to call the boy a prodigy yet, considering this was just one exercise, but he wouldn't be surprised if he turned out to be one, considering who his father was. Never mind the fact that he had cheated at the exercise. He had circumvented what was likely a lack of pure control, most likely from his sheer amount of chakra, by inventing a new way to go about the exercise. And he had done it without one single clue from an outside source. Simply amazing. You cheated, brat. Again, it wouldn't do to let him develop an ego. What do you mean I cheated? I even grabbed fresh leaves so you wouldn't think that I'd licked them. Naruto was upset at the accusation. He had done it all on his own. He couldn't understand why he was being accused of cheating. I know that, but there are different types of cheating. There's cheating to pretend you can do it, and then there's cheating to find a different way to do it. Basically, you took a shortcut by laying down. The leaves are meant to go on one at a time to demonstrate full control, and in a way where gravity will make them fall if you don't use chakra the whole time. What you seem to be doing is getting them in place, and then coating your whole front side in chakra to make them all stick at once. Naruto's face was falling at the explanation, so Jiraiya marched on with it. Still, you have to control the output properly, which is impressive, and the ingenuity that you showed coming up with that strategy isn't something I want to discourage. That cheered the boy right up, and it should. Not more than an hour after initial instructions, and he was already blowing away any expectations Jiraiya had for the next 2 weeks. You can keep doing it your way for now, and we will work on finer control later. It'll probably be quite the challenge for you to even get one down given the amount of chakra you have. Naruto just nodded at this, but something shifted in him. His determination was nearly radiating off him, and suddenly Jiraiya thought he might not have as much trouble as he initially expected. Well, let's get some food in us. You must be exhausted after the last 2 days. If you want to work on the control after dinner, you're more than welcome to. Naruto nodded again, and Jiraiya used a small katon, fire release, jutsu to light the wood that had been gathered earlier for a campfire. He noticed how close of an eye Naruto had been watching him with when he had done that, and just chuckled internally. He remembered when he was young and was all about learning jutsu too, back before the wars changed him. Naruto watched as his white-haired sensei sharpened a stick with a few quick movements and a kunai, and proceeded to stick the 6 fish onto it, making a kebab of sorts. As Jiraiya put the fish over the fire like a rotisserie, Naruto went over to his backpack and grabbed 2 cups of the ramen that he had brought with him. Hey, old man, can you possibly boil some water for this ramen? Jiraiya nodded, but asked, do you really need to eat 2 cups? If you only brought 8 of them, you'll run out in another day or 2. I'm only eating 1, the other one is for you. Naruto replied quietly, if you want it, that is. Jiraiya knew that for whatever reason, this was a big deal for Naruto to be sharing his ramen. Sure I do, thanks Gaki. You're welcome, geezer. Jiraiya let the nickname go this time. As Jiraiya prepped the meal, Naruto stopped paying attention and picked up 2 leaves. He stuck out his forearm and put both the leaves on top of it, one on his wrist by his hand, and the other right by the crook of his elbow, almost on his bicep. He tried to channel chakra only to the one on his wrist, and when he felt like he had it, he turned his arm over, letting gravity take hold of the leaf higher up on his arm. Only it didn't. Despite being nearly a foot apart, both leaves stuck fast to his arm. Dismayed, he cut the chakra to his arm and let them fall to the ground, and took the now cooked fish and ramen that Jiraiya was offering him and began eating. Do you know what shinobi means to be a shinobi, Naruto? Naruto thought about this for almost a whole minute, taking a few more bites of the bland fish before answering. Well, Gigi is the Hokage, the strongest shinobi in the village, and he always says that the whole village is his family and that it's the Hokage's job to protect them all. He said in a quiet seriousness, so I guess protecting your loved ones is what it means to be a shinobi, he finished. Soon Jiraiya would have to adapt to the constant unpredictability of the boy, or else his newest student would start to think of him as a fool with how often he was caught off guard. Not that Naruto was seasoned enough to tell when he was, but it was good practice regardless. That's one hell of an answer, Gaki, but it's not quite right. Naruto donned his frustration face, a very similar look to his concentration face, but his brows furrowed a little more, and his eyes held a different kind of fire. Jiraiya marched on. To be a shinobi means to endure. It's not about how many jutsu you have, or how cool the ones you have are. It's not about killing, or even fighting, and it's not even about protecting your loved ones or clients either. Being a shinobi is about enduring anything that is thrown at you. It's about having guts, the guts to give it your all, get knocked down, and give even more the next time. It's the guts to never give up. Jiraiya was speaking with more and more intensity and passion, but now calm to a slow and serious drawl. Our world is harsh and cruel. A lot of ninja don't make it past the rank of Chunin because they can't handle the life of a ninja. They don't have what it takes to endure the pain. There hasn't been a Kage, alive or dead, who didn't have to endure hardships that would break most jonin. If your goal is to be Hokage, I just wanted you to know that. There are no shortcuts. It will be hard, and at times, it will suck, but enduring it will make you that much tougher, that much stronger, and that much more capable. Jiraiya was finally finished. The speech might have been a little rough for a boy that age, but he saw greatness in his future, and he wanted to make sure that the blonde terror lived long enough to realize it. Naruto was wide-eyed by the end of the speech. Till now, Jiraiya had been mostly aloof. He knew the man was strong, and he could see seriousness in him, but he had also been relaxed the whole time that he had known him. But during the speech he had shifted, and Naruto had seen the true seriousness of a man who was proclaimed one of the legendary 3 ninja and the sensei of the Yondaime, 4th Hokage. Now, about your initial answer. It sounds to me like you've found your ninja way. Ninja way? Naruto asked, confused. Yes. To be a shinobi means to endure. That is your what. Your ninja way is your why and how. Your reason for doing it, and how you will go about doing it. It's kind of like an oath. Naruto nodded at that. It made sense. What's your ninja way, sensei? Jiraiya thought for a few seconds. You want to be Hokage, so your ninja way is to always protect those precious to you, no matter what it takes. My goal is to bring peace to the world and end the cycle of hatred. Jiraiya looked sad as he said those words. Naruto looked into his sensei's eyes and held his gaze. Seconds passed before Naruto nodded and said, that'll be my nindo too. Sorry, Naruto. You already have yours, and I don't want you to change it on my account. Naruto shook his head. I'm not changing it. I'm adding it. They'll both be my ninja way. To protect my precious people no matter what, and to bring peace to the ninja world. What happens if your 2 ninja ways collide, and following one path goes against the other? What if protecting your loved ones is detrimental to bringing about peace? Jiraiya asked. The question wasn't theoretical to him. He had started the cycle of hatred fresh in many people by killing shinobi in order to protect his village. Then I'll get strong enough to make another path, one that follows both nindos, believe it. Determination radiated from him once again, and Jiraiya found himself believing the boy. You were something else, you know that? He turned around so the boy wouldn't see the single tear streaking down his face. Get some sleep, kid. We have another long day of travel tomorrow. Jiraiya ducked into his tent, and within 30 seconds, Naruto could hear him snoring away. Must be an elite shinobi trick to be able to fall asleep that quickly, Naruto thought before he silently picked up the 2 leaves he had been working with. If he was going to be strong enough to protect his new sensei, Sarutobi Jiji, Tuchi, Ayam, and Irika sensei, he'd better get to work. Jiraiya awoke to sunlight streaming in through the opening in his simple tent. He stepped out of it and into the fresh morning air. Taking a deep breath, he moved to Naruto's tent to wake him, only to find it empty, and from the looks of it, completely unused. Foregoing basic means of search, Jiraiya closed his eyes while making the ram seal, reaching out with his senses. It didn't take long to find Naruto's massive reserves, although they did feel quite depleted. Moving to the east of the clearing, Jiraiya walked about 200 feet into the line of trees. There, he found his student passed out snoring, in perhaps the most uncomfortable position to sleep in possible. Laying at the base of the trunk of a large tree, there was drool coming out of the left side of his mouth, and a snot bubble moved in tune with his light snoring from his right nostril. Yep, that was the 4th Hokage's son, all right. Jiraiya examined the area a little closer. Many of the trees had varying sizes of bark splintered off. Given yesterday's training, he assumed the boy had been attempting the tree walking exercise. What's more, the tree he was laying under didn't have a single mark on it. That meant that he'd either fallen asleep before he could attempt to walk on it, or he had the exercise down. Knowing Naruto for a grand total of a day and a half, Jiraiya was absolutely positive that there was no chance he fell asleep before completing it enough to at least cling to the tree. The hyperactive blonde was too determined to give in that easily, and Jiraiya knew the speech he had given him had only fanned the flames of his determination. Deciding it was best to let him rest, Jiraiya sent a pair of shadow clones to pack up camp while he ran through a familiar set of hand seals. Summoning Jutsu, Jiraiya said. A puff of smoke revealed a toad of about human height, albeit much wider. Gamma, this is my new apprentice that I sent word about. He seems to have overworked himself training last night. Mind giving him a ride for a few hours so he can catch up on sleep? The toad croaked once, which Jiraiya knew meant yes. He picked Naruto up easily and secured him on his favorite summon's head. He was appalled at the makeup of the boy. He was nearly all skin and bones. What little muscle he did have was strong, probably a side effect of having the QB sealed inside of him. That would have to be one of the first things he would rectify. He couldn't handle the type of training that Jiraiya knew he would soon be begging for if his body lacked proper nourishment. His charge secured, Jiraiya headed back to camp to grab the sealing scrolls his clones would leave, with Gamma and Naruto in tow. It was nearly noon when Naruto finally awoke with a groan, sunlight beating down on him. Welcome back to the land of the living, Jiraiya let out cheerily. On what happened, Gigi? Where are we? Jiraiya did not miss what he knew was Naruto's affectionate nickname for the Sandaime. I thought Sarutobi-sensei was Gigi. Don't worry, I'm sure Gramps will like his new nickname just as much as the old one. Haha, well, as long as you call him Gramps, I'll be all right with old man. Jiraiya shouted out lightheartedly. As for what happened, I was hoping you could tell me. I found you outside of camp passed out under a tree. You had a sizable dent in your chakra reserves too. Jiraiya decided to let the boy brag a little bit, so he tossed him an easy question. How many leaves can you stick to your body now? Ugh, just 2, and even that was insanely hard. Naruto sounded exasperated, though 2 leaves in one day really wasn't that bad at all. Progress was progress after all. This wasn't the answer Jiraiya had been expecting, however. Only 2, huh? I thought you'd have been able to do more than that by now. Jiraiya decided to push a little bit. Well, it's really hard to keep them in spot without using chakra all over my body, Naruto said, clearly frustrated. Plus, it takes more focus to keep my feet stuck to the tree, and I kept dropping leaves and having to walk back down to pick them up and start over again. It was so slow going, Naruto complained. There was the surprise that Jiraiya was already beginning to expect each time he spoke with the boy. Going from 0 to 2 leaves in one night was something a fairly talented older academy student could do. For someone his age to get down tree walking in one night was bordering on prodigy. But he had seen Naruto struggle to narrow his chakra to even half his arm. With the amount of chakra he had, even Jiraiya was impressed. Well, why don't you walk me through how you got to where you did? and maybe I can help you increase that number." Naruto proceeded to clue in his sensei on his late-night training. Flashback. Naruto had been at it for about an hour when he finally turned over his arm, and one of the two leaves on it floated to the ground. "Yes," he half-shouted, the word dying in his mouth when he remembered his new sensei was sleeping in the nearby tent. He wasn't sure he could contain his excitement the more he advanced, so he decided to move a little farther away from camp. Once he was far enough away, he proceeded to continue the same exercise. However, this time, he added another leaf between the two. His goal was now to get the leaf in the middle to fall, and the two on the ends to stick when he turned his arm over. It took him about half an hour to get this down. The better feel he got for it, the quicker he seemed to pick up the next step. When he got to holding 5 leaves and dropping 5, about 6 hours after Jiraiya had gone to sleep, he decided it was time to give tree walking a shot. He didn't really know how many leaves he would need to be able to stick before he would be able to walk up a tree, but he was too excited not to try. He walked up to the nearest tree and put his foot on it as he had seen Jiraiya do, and tried to channel chakra into it to start walking, and fell flat on his back. Dumb tree. He brushed himself off and gave it another shot. This time he tried a lot more chakra, and before he could even put his full weight on the tree, the bark exploded, leaving a large dent on the tree. He rested his hand on the tree as he thought. Channeling chakra for the leaves hadn't been too hard. Only condensing it to a small area had been, and no matter how much he used, the leaves never exploded. He had even gotten to the point where he could easily stick a leaf on the end of each of his 10 fingers. He found channeling chakra there even easier than it was to channel to his arms. He guessed that made sense though. He was much more used to using his hands for finer control over things like chopsticks than he was his arms. And my feet, he thought. All he used those for were walking and running really. Maybe even the occasional jump if he was excited. He looked at the tree in front of him and decided to try his hands first. Reaching up, he channeled chakra into his hands and stuck them onto the tree. He then flexed his core and bent his knees so that he was just hanging by his chakra-stuck hands. He made it a few seconds before his control slipped enough for him to lose his grip and he fell. The next time he tried it, he made it 30 seconds. The third time he had lost count at 2 minutes and let go because it became boring. This threw him into deep thought. It was obvious he could use chakra better in his hands than he could anywhere else. It also seemed obvious, to him at least, that this was because he was so used to using his hands for everything, that he not only used them for finer control, but he thought of them in terms of finer control. He pictured his hands and thought about 2 palms, which had a heel and a main flat part, and 5 fingers on each. Each finger had 3 sections except for the thumbs, which had 2. Then there were the tips of the fingers, which were different from the pads of them. He thought of them in small increments, each of which he could channel chakra to. He remembered the first lesson that Irika had taught them when he got to the academy. He had only been awake and paying attention because it was a new sensei, and because he hadn't received any dirty looks from said sensei yet. The lesson was about the chakra system. It didn't make much sense to him then, but now when he recalled his favorite academy teacher, he remembered him saying there were points on the body where the chakra could be released. There wasn't one huge gate that chakra came out of, but a bunch of tiny little ones. He couldn't remember how many or where they were, but if his newest sensei could walk on the tree, then there must be some in the foot. He tried to feel them in his feet, but felt nothing. He then tried to feel them in his hands, and thought he might have felt a vague something. It was less of feeling something, and more of just feeling that he could make chakra come out of certain areas, like he'd done it before. That checked out as far as he was concerned, so he began to think of his feet more completely. There was a heel, an inside arch, and the outer part of the middle of the foot. There was the ball of the foot and the pad of it, as well as the pads of the 5 toes on each one. It didn't seem like there were as many parts to it as the hands, or at least parts that could come in contact with the tree. He guessed that was why ninjas used hand signs, and not foot signs, for jutsu. He figured his best shot was to try and focus on his heel and the ball of his foot, as well as his toes. These were the spots that he was most familiar with because of walking and running. He put his foot on a different tree and focused on the spots, trying to channel chakra to them individually. This time when he tried to step, he managed to lift his whole body up half a step before he slid back down to the ground. He grinned with excitement. That old toad man was in for a surprise in the morning. From there, it was just trial and error trying to figure it out, and get the feel for it. He found that if he tried to disperse his chakra into an area larger than his foot, that he had an easier time of staying securely in place. He'd mentally called this chakra leaking, as it felt like he was letting it leak from his control. It sounded counterintuitive, but it had felt right. Most importantly, it seemed to work. After another 3 hours, he could walk somewhat steadily up and down a tree, and had even started to try and stick leaves to his torso while doing it. Just as the beginnings of a sunrise began to creep over the horizon, he had passed out while staring up at his most recent tree. In flashback, Jiraiya had listened quietly with interest, only interrupting to ask questions when he wanted something explained with a little more detail or to chuckle at something he said. "Well, kid, once again you've gotten the right answer using the wrong formula," Jiraiya chuckled at him. "You're technically wasting a ton of chakra doing the what did you call it? Chakra leaking? By allowing it to leak out, you're using a large amount of chakra to do a small chakra task. You're probably expelling 4 or 5 times more than what's necessary, and the extra chakra is just being wasted so that the proper amount is actually going towards the technique." Jiraiya held up his hand to cut off his apprentice before he could become sad. "But, once again, Naruto, what you've done is kind of genius. You'll need to work on your control so you can feel locked in without using your chakra leaking method. But anybody else I know wouldn't be able to walk on a tree even a little bit with the amount of control you have." "So what does that mean exactly?" Naruto asked slowly. He was trying his best to understand, but some of the things Jiraiya said just didn't make much sense. "Frankly, you're really good at it sucking." The young blonde deadpanned. "Well, then you suck at teaching since you're my sensei," he said, sticking his tongue out at the older ninja. Jiraiya face-palmed at his student's statement. "I was just being sarcastic, Naruto. What I'm trying to say is that you're really good at doing things in ways they weren't designed to be done. Unpredictable, if you will. And your instincts for finding a way to get it done are second to none, not even the 4th Hokage's." Jiraiya hated to inflate the boy's ego, especially considering he was a bit of a loudmouth already, but he did enjoy seeing the boy's eyes go wide and his face light up with praise. "Well, I think you've rested enough. Game, you can go. Thank you for your assistance." The toad poofed back to its home with nothing more than a rib bit, causing Naruto to fall on his butt. "Ow, what the hell was that for you, old geezer? You could have let me hop down first." Naruto hollered at Jiraiya while rubbing his backside. "If you think that hurts, maybe we shouldn't start your physical training today. After all, I'm sure you're not as tough as Sasuke Uchiha. I heard he can do 100 push-ups, all in one go. I bet you can't even do 50 right now." Naruto had steam pouring out of his ears by the end of Jiraiya's taunting. Instead of trying to argue with the old man, Naruto wordlessly stared him down with all the might he could muster at 7.5, and slowly dropped to the ground and began doing push-ups, right in the middle of the road. "No, kid, I didn't mean to do it right, oh whatever. Let's see what you got." "And that's 88. Not too bad, brat. Definitely better than I expected." Naruto was still at the top of his last push-up. His arms were locked out, his face was red, and sweat was dripping off his nose onto the compact dirt road. Not done yet. He managed to get out to Jiraiya. "You know, you have to go down again to get 89. "Can't," Jiraiya heard through ragged breaths. "Then why don't you stop or drop? You can rest up and we can try again later, or do some other exercises." "Won't let Sasuke win." Naruto was shaking like a leaf in a desert breeze at this point, and Jiraiya was once again impressed with Naruto's determination. It seemed he had inherited the indomitable will that made both his parents such strong ninja, although he seemed to already be matching them in it despite his young age. Jiraiya shuddered at how terrifying this little blonde would grow up to be. Being the awesome and insanely handsome and great teacher that Jiraiya was, he put his foot on Naruto's back and pressed him down so he had to drop out of his push-up stance. "What the hell did you do that for, old man? You made me lose to that bastard. That's not fair." He couldn't tell if Naruto's face was red from the exercise or anger at having, in his mind, lost. "Life's not fair, kid, especially the life of a shinobi. You don't like it? Then do something about it. And watch your language. That's pretty foul for a 6-year-old. Jiraiya paused, if only fairly briefly, to ignore Naruto's indignant shout that he was, in fact, almost 8. "It doesn't really bother me at all, but you don't want to pick up bad habits so early in life." He left out that he had picked up many bad habits, and Tsunade had punished him many times because of it. It wasn't worth the trouble. Well, maybe it was to him. Naruto brought Jiraiya out of his train of thoughts. Fine, but what am I supposed to do about you putting your foot on my back? You're huge and probably weigh like 1,000 pounds. Naruto protested. Better get a lot stronger then, or come up with a way to skirt the traditional way of doing things. Naruto looked like he was going to protest, but his face froze in thought, and then he grinned. Jiraiya had seen that evil, malicious grin before from another Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi before. He was terrified, and it had nothing to do with the beast sealed in the boy. Moving along now, and completely disregarding that last train of thought, Jiraiya said quickly, I believe I owe you a jutsu. Previous devious thoughts completely forgotten, Naruto jumped up and pumped a fist in the air in excitement. Yes, one step closer to being the greatest ninja ever. Okay, kid, Shinobi lesson number 1, Jiraiya said, clearing out his ear with a pinky. Stealth and deception are a ninja's best tool, not a kunai, and not a big fancy jutsu. You gotta learn to control your emotions, whether they're good or bad. Jiraiya explained, it's okay to be loud when you're in the village around familiar people, but when we're out on the road, you might want to tone it down a little bit unless we've made camp. Jiraiya finished. How come it's okay to be loud at camp? Won't that alert possible enemies to where we are? Naruto questioned seriously. Jiraiya had to give the kid credit. He might have had the attention span of one of the Inuzuka's Ninkin puppies, but he was curious in all the right ways and asked great questions. Jiraiya told him as much. Great question, Naruto. Those shadow clones I send out place down seals on the perimeter of the camp. One of the seals they put down is a privacy seal, so nobody can hear us while we're in it. I'll show you some of the other seals tonight and explain what they do too. Jiraiya was already learning to predict how Naruto would think, and thus was answering some of his questions before he could even ask them, if the boy's facial expression was anything to go by. Okay, thank you, Jiraiya-sensei. Also, didn't we already do lesson number 1? Huh. You said lesson number 1 yesterday. Jiraiya nodded at this, so Naruto continued. How can they both be number 1? In this world, all these lessons, everything you learn as a ninja, are equally important. Whether it's how to stay quiet, or how to throw a kunai, or what jutsu is best for which situation, any one of them could save your life, and forgetting them could cost you it. So they all are number 1. Jiraiya finished softly. That doesn't make any sense, but I don't really care. Now teach me that jutsu so I can kick Sasuke's, but you know, Naruto exclaimed, although much quieter than the first time. Jiraiya nodded and motioned for Naruto to follow him, and led him away from the road. Where are we going, Jiraiya-sensei? The young blonde questioned. The Shadow Clone Jutsu is a technique of Konoha invented by the Nidaime Hokage Tobirama Senju himself. Jiraiya explained. While the jutsu isn't exactly a secret considering how often it's used, and taking into account missing Nin, it still wouldn't do to have any spies learning the technique in great detail, straight from the mouth of one of our elite ninja. Jiraiya, being an experienced spy himself, probably the most experienced in the elemental nations if he thought about it, knew nobody was following them. Going a little out of their way to drill a lesson into the kid wouldn't hurt them at all though. They were making good time anyway. I don't see any of our elite ninja around here, sensei. Are one of those ANBU guys with the masks following us in the trees? Naruto playfully said with a huge grin, making a big deal of shading his eyes and looking up into the trees. Jiraiya rolled his eyes in an attempt to quell his anger. The boy knew how to push his buttons, that was for certain. Just listen up, brat. I'll make 4 clones to put down seals so we can work on the technique away from prying eyes. Jiraiya said as he made a cross sign with his hands and summoned 5 copies of himself. Once the 4 designated for seals were done with their jobs, Jiraiya began. The first thing you need to know about this jutsu is that it uses a lot of chakra. More than just about any genin should be able to use. Because of this, you are forbidden from ever teaching anybody this technique without permission from myself or the Hokage. Am I clear? Jiraiya being serious was a sign that Naruto shouldn't joke around, so he just quietly nodded. Second, the clones break fairly easily. Jiraiya turned and punched the 5th clone that he had summoned, finally quenching Naruto's curiosity of its purpose. They don't have the durability that some of the other corporeal clones like the Earth clone or the flexibility of the Water clone. Jiraiya continued to explain in what Naruto would come to think of as his sensei voice. However, despite these weaknesses, they can be extremely useful. Yes, Naruto. You don't have to raise your hand, though. You're my only student. Jiraiya said with some confusion. Oh, sorry, sensei. Irika-sensei said it was rude to talk without raising my hand. Naruto shot out quickly before getting to his question. What other kind of clones are there? You said earth and water, and this one is shadow. Are there fire clones? What about light clones? Can I make a clone out of kunai? Naruto inquired. This kid would probably give Jiraiya an aneurysm by the time he graduated the academy. He just had a way of questioning what essentially was hundreds of years of training and the status quo. Without even seeming to try, he was just that curious and thought that far outside the box. Actually, there was no box in Naruto's brain. It was more like a 100-sided object that was continuously shifting. Jiraiya thought some more before answering. You asked some good questions, kid. And they were good, and Jiraiya would definitely be looking into the last one that he had mentioned. Stupid kid geniuses. Fire clones, as far as I know, are too unstable and too damaging to themselves to be of any real use, or even be considered a technique. Wind clones would be even harder to control and potentially dangerous to anybody using them if they burst at the wrong time. Jiraiya was more thinking aloud here than responding to Naruto. A lightning clone is an existing jutsu, and quite a dangerous one at that, especially in the hands of Kakashi. I suppose you could make a kunai clone, although going about it would be difficult, and I'm not sure what its use would be. The first Hokage was an avid user of wood clone, and of course there's the Academy standard clone, which is more of a jinjutsu really. I suppose you could make a clone out of anything really. Whether it's worth it or not just depends on the chakra cost and the abilities of the clone. Jiraiya concluded. Sensei? Yes, Naruto. I think I'm going to need a notepad or something. That's kind of a lot to remember, isn't it? Naruto questioned. It was less of a lesson and more of satisfying your curiosity, but you can't use notes in the field, kid. We will go over it as many times as we need until you know it by heart. We can revisit clones later during a chakra theory lesson. For now, it's time to teach you the shadow clone jutsu. Naruto was bouncing up and down, almost vibrating at this point. Come on, sensei, let's do this. Jiraiya chuckled and nodded. All right, brat. For starters, I'll only allow you to try and make one until you get better control of your chakra. I don't need my own sensei mad at me if you end up killing yourself on your first real jutsu. The blonde paled at this, but his face never lost its determination. The hand sign is real simple. You extend your middle and pointer finger on both hands and make a plus sign with them. A plus, because you're adding more of yourself? Jiraiya had never thought about it that way. At the time he had learned it, he was just excited he could have more than one of him to kick Orochimaru's ass. Not that it worked. That's exactly right, Gaki. Glad you picked up on that so I didn't have to tell you. He had no shame. He couldn't let the almost 8-year-old think he was more clever than one of the Sannin. Now, when you're molding chakra, just picture your chakra forming into an exact version of yourself. Most people can't get it even the first few times, so we can try meditation to become more in tune with your body if you struggle with it. In truth, most Jonin took days to learn the technique, and that was only if they had well above average reserves. But the boy was so full of surprises, he wouldn't be surprised if he did it the very first attempt. All right, I think I got it, sensei. Just watch me. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. There was a huge poof of smoke, bigger than when Naruto had unsealed his backpack way back in Konoha. When it cleared, standing there was Naruto. Just one of him. Damn it. First, how do you feel? Tired at all? Naruto shook his head. In fact, he felt better than he had before he tried. All right then, you can try again. Try and focus on forcing your chakra into an area that's about your size. Naruto nodded. He was surprisingly quiet when he was focused. The blonde terror made the hand sign, called out the jutsu name as forcefully as he could, and tried to make a copy of himself. Another plume of smoke, and there was a deflated-looking version of himself lying next to him. He sighed. It's all right, Naruto. You can't get everything on the first try. Still feeling okay? Jiraiya questioned cautiously. He really didn't want Sarutobi mad at him. Yeah, I actually have felt better after trying the last 2 times, like I'm more calm and less like I'm gonna burst. Jiraiya looked perplexed at this, so Naruto just kept talking. Honestly, it feels wrong. Do you mind if I try something? Jiraiya nodded. The boy had proven himself plenty capable of finding solutions already. Just don't overdo it and use too much chakra. Naruto nodded. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto said, making the hand sign. He closed his eyes and focused on a mental image of himself, and pictured more appearing around him the way they had for Jiraiya. He then willed his chakra to act and do as he wanted. There was another poof of smoke, this one wider than tall. When it was all clear, there were 5 perfect copies of Naruto standing around with the biggest grins Jiraiya had ever seen. Jiraiya walked up and poked one right in the forehead despite its protests. Yup, it was solid. He turned to the real Naruto. Are you okay? He asked seriously. Nod. How much chakra would you say you have left after those 3 attempts? Just a rough estimate will work. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Sensei? As far as I can tell, that was the same amount of chakra that I used when I tried to just make 1. I wasn't even trying to make 5. I just pictured you making them when I molded the chakra, and it happened by accident. It doesn't even feel like I used any chakra, or maybe I don't know what that feels like. Jiraiya just shook his head, looked up at Naruto, opened his mouth, and then shook it again. You're something else, brat, you know that? Naruto smiled at him. So you keep telling me, you geezer, he beamed. Just for that, I'm imposing a limit on you. You can't use the jutsu unless it's to practice it, until you can make exactly 1 clone. And I better not see a giant puff of smoke either. With the amount of chakra you used to make 5, you probably could have made 30. I won't teach you any more jutsu until you do, Jiraiya exclaimed. What? You finally teach me a jutsu, and I'm not even allowed to use it? That's so unfair, old man. Naruto retorted indignantly. Have you forgotten lesson number 1 already, my precious student? Jiraiya asked teasingly. No, lesson number 1. A shinobi's life is unfair. If you don't like it, do something about it. Naruto recited monotonously. So his ears do work. Great job, kid. Now drop and give me 80 more push-ups. Jiraiya nearly sang at Naruto. I hate you, Naruto grumbled. I don't care, Jiraiya laughed back. This next part should admittedly have been a whole new chapter. No clue what I was thinking putting all this in one. Now is a good time for a water break and a posture check. 3 days later. Naruto and Jiraiya found themselves in another clearing, not unlike the one they were in the first night on the road. They had made their way deep into the land of rivers to meet with a contact of Jiraiya's spy network. Naruto had been hard at work on his chakra control, as well as his physical strength, and although he had seen much more progress in the former than the latter, he had still managed to do 103 push-ups. Sasuke was going to get his, but hooped when he got back to Konoha. He could already picture it. Jiraiya interrupted him from his mental happy place. All right, brat, you think you got it down? Let's see it, Jiraiya requested. Naruto nodded, took a step back, closed his eyes, and took a deep inhale. He let it out calmly and made the necessary hand signs. As Jiraiya looked on, his blonde student disappeared and was replaced with a wooden log. Jiraiya felt Naruto's presence behind him and turned around. Well done, Naruto. You've come a long way. Naruto beamed at the praise. Jiraiya had just shown him the substitution jutsu yesterday morning, and he could already do it without saying the jutsu name. Jiraiya had said that the jutsu was one of the most important a ninja could master, and Naruto had taken him seriously and worked hard at it. However, if you truly want to master it, you'll have to do it much faster than that. If you can increase your speed, though, it can keep you alive against much tougher opponents and get you out of some sticky situations. Naruto nodded. Now, why don't you make a few clones and send them to get some food? Fish should be easy to come by. Naruto nodded again and made the sign and popped 10 clones into existence. Jiraiya shook his head. It was like the jutsu was made for the kid. Despite only minor improvements to his chakra control, he'd gotten down to 1 clone, with minimal chakra smoke. It really wasn't fair. Sensei. Naruto waggled a finger at him with a smile. Don't forget Shinobi's lesson number 1. He giggled before sending his clones off to do his dirty work for him. Jiraiya sighed. Damn prodigies. Jiraiya reached into his vest and pulled out Naruto's scroll that the Sandaime had given him. Naruto, I think it's time you open this scroll up. Do you really mean that, Jiraiya-sensei? Because you wouldn't let me earlier even after I completed both the tasks you gave me, he said cheekily. I wanted to wait much longer for this, but it seems you're determined to break that timetable by years, Jiraiya said. but there's some things you must know before I let you open it. First, this information was kept from you and the villagers because it's dangerous. Jiraiya was using his Sannin's super powerful serious shinobi voice, so Naruto knew he was dead serious, but he was still confused. Knowing who his mother was as dangerous? Jiraiya seemed to catch on to his train of thought and continued. Both of your parents were powerful ninja, and they both racked up quite a few enemies in their time as Leaf Nin. Not only did they have enemies, but your mother's clan feared across the elemental nations. That's why they were all but wiped out in the Second Great Shinobi War, Jiraiya said solemnly. I don't believe anybody in Konoha would try and harm you because of that, but they might try and take advantage of you because of your surname. It carries a lot of weight. When you become a Chunin or turn 16, you'll technically own a seat on the council. Technically, he would own two, since any Hokage's family name legally becomes a clan name according to the law. He wasn't ready to hear that, though. I have a clan. What is it? What's my real name? Naruto didn't know what to think, didn't know what to feel, and his face betrayed that. There was a swirling hurricane of emotions written all over it. Uzumaki. That hasn't changed. I know they told you that it was just a random name given to some orphans, but you're the one and only that's in Konoha. But they're all gone now? Naruto squeaked out. Jiraiya nodded, and then elaborated, I'm sure there are others out there. Maybe even a few that carry the name, but the clan and village are gone, Jiraiya said sadly. Naruto nodded. I still down in sadness. Do you think I could rebuild it when I become Hokage? I think you can start even before then. After you open this scroll, you'll be considered a full-fledged Uzumaki, and when you return to Konoha, your status as an heir will be solidified. Naruto was pleased at that, but couldn't find it in him to feel excited. Jiraiya handed over the scroll. The swirls on the end caps are the Uzumaki clan symbol. They were from another hidden village called Yuzushogikyure, but they were such close allies with Konoha that the clan symbol is on the back of every single Chunin and Jonin vest that the village issues, Jiraiya informed him. According to Sensei, not making it in time to stop their destruction is one of his greatest failures and biggest regrets. Naruto nodded. How do I open it? It's a blood seal. Anybody with Uzumaki blood just needs to run some over the seal, and then channel chakra like I showed you on the storage scroll, and it'll open. Jiraiya pointed to where he needed to channel chakra. Naruto bit his thumb like he had seen Jiraiya do when he summoned one of his awesome toads, and ran the bloody digit across the seal. He channeled chakra where he was shown, and instead of bursting in smoke, the black ink formula began to retract in on itself in a swirling motion, until it made its own little version of the Uzumaki crest. Naruto gripped the left cap and twisted. It came off fairly easily, and when he looked inside, he saw a large storage scroll with a much smaller one next to it. He pulled both of them out and opted to unroll the smaller one first. On the paper, he found his surrogate grandfather's writing. Naruto, I'm sorry that I'm not there to tell you about this in person and that I wasn't able to tell you earlier in your life. In hindsight, keeping this from you seems like an unnecessary measure, and I apologize for that, for I only had your best interests at heart. Your mother was Kushina Uzumaki. She was a red-headed Jonin kunoichi with a fiery temperament and an indomitable will. She was determined beyond what seemed possible and stubborn as an ox. She was also one of the kindest women I had the pleasure of knowing. Though you don't have her hair or her eyes, you seem to carry on that Uzumaki stubbornness that she was so well known for. Her nickname was the Red Hot Habanero, and she lived up to it every single day of her life. She was vicious yet graceful, stubborn yet loyal, terrifying yet beautiful. She was your mother, and she loved you more than anything in the world, more than life itself. I cannot go into detail about the situation, but the night the Kyuubi attacked, she saved you from its wrath. She loved you so much that she sacrificed her life so that you could live yours. You may have felt lonely all these years in the village by yourself, but just know you've never truly been alone, because she's a part of you and always will be. I have included a picture of her in the small seal at the bottom of this scroll, as well as her necklace that she wore every day, on or off duty. Though the pendant that was on it broke, it is a piece of her that you can wear to remind you of where you come from. Perhaps we can find you a pendant to go with it. Inside the larger sealing scroll is every piece of Uzumaki history, artifacts, techniques, pictures, and anything else I could find within Konoha, as well as locations that you could potentially find more, though I wish that you let Jiraiya dictate when you go to those locations so that you are safe. I do hope you can forgive me for holding out on telling you this and giving you your inheritance for this long. I see you as my first grandson Naruto, and just like your mother, I love you very much. Sincerely, the Sandaime Hokage, or Gigi, as you call me. Naruto was pouring tears before he even came close to finishing the note. He had a mother. She sounded so badass and amazing, and it made him so sad that he couldn't meet her, wouldn't ever get the chance to meet her until he too passed. But she had loved him so much that she had died for him. He couldn't believe it, but he was sobbing about it. He wished he knew how to set up those privacy seals so that Jiraiya wouldn't see him like this. It was embarrassing. Jiraiya laid a hand on his shoulder. It's okay to cry, kid. Remember the very first thing I taught you. It's okay to cry if you're happy. Shinobi lesson number 0. Naruto nodded, but didn't stop sobbing. Your mom was truly one of a kind, just like you. You remind me of her every day, and she would be so proud of you. It would be unbearable to be around. She would tell everyone in a 10-mile radius about how great you are, and she'd beat anybody who disagreed into the ground. Naruto laughed at this, but it came out as an awkward sob with a lot of snot thrown in. I'll go check how the clones are doing with food and give you some space. I won't be far. Holler if you need me. You remember which part of the storage seal to open it? Naruto nodded, getting his sobs under control a little bit. Good. Don't open the big scroll until you call me back, okay? Jiraiya got another nod. So he body flickered out of the clearing in the directions that Naruto's clones had gone. Naruto looked at the seal at the bottom of the page and channeled chakra where he was supposed to. He was ready to see his mother. With a poof larger than the scroll itself, Naruto unsealed the picture of his mom and her necklace. His breath was taken away. She was beautiful in every meaning of the word. He couldn't believe he was related to such an angel. His mom was so pretty and so cool that his dad must have been the coolest guy in the whole world to get to marry her. Probably cooler than the Yondaime, he thought before thinking that it probably wasn't possible. I'll rebuild the clan, and any Uzumaki out there will be welcome to come and rejoin. The Uzumakis will be a name that's respected once again, and they'll live in a huge compound in Konoha. I promise, he said quietly to her picture, as he put the peculiar necklace around his neck. It was just a blank leather cord, black and worn. Naruto hugged her picture and cried, bawling for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes. When he finally felt like he was out of tears, he rubbed his eyes and took a deep breath. Once composed, he called for Jiraiya, and in seconds he was back in the clearing with the fish. I accidentally pushed your clones into the river and dispelled them. Hope that's not a problem, Jiraiya said, hoping for some comedic relief. Naruto gave a dry chuckle. It's fine, old man. He didn't have enough in him to start an argument with the spiky-haired sage, as much fun as it usually was. Will you go through my inheritance with me? He asked hopefully. Are you sure? Everything in that scroll is squarely yours, Naruto. I know Sarutobi-sensei sealed some techniques in there for you, and you don't have to show them to me or anybody else if you don't want to. Those are clan techniques. Your clan's techniques, Jiraiya explained. Naruto seemed to be in awe at this. He truly couldn't fathom it. But if I'm the only one in the clan, I can decide who gets to see the techniques, right? Jiraiya nodded. Then I want you to look at them with me and help me train them, if you would. Jiraiya nodded again, not really trusting his voice. This boy had brought out feelings he didn't know he was capable of feeling anymore. After a few seconds of silence, Naruto picked up the large sealing scroll, but paused. Do you have a clan, Jiraiya-sensei? He asked. Jiraiya responded, Nope, my dad was a shinobi, though he went MIA when I was real young. I barely remember him. My mom was just a civilian. Jiraiya smiled. It's one of the reasons I chose to train the 4th Hokage. He was from a completely civilian family. I guess you could say you already have a leg up on him. Naruto thought deeply for a second. It was pretty cool, but resolved not to let that keep him from working hard. All right, let's bust this baby open and see what kind of badass stuff my clan left me. Naruto shouted. This earned him a smack in the back of the head. Language. And what did I say about being so loud? Jiraiya scolded him. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and grumbled. Yeah, Shinobi lesson number 1. Stealth and deception are a ninja's number 1 tool. I remember. He slid the scroll in front of him and unrolled it horizontally, revealing a large sealing matrix that was different from the one Jiraiya had shown them back in the village. All right, Brad. What we have here is a multi-point sealing scroll. Child's play for the Uzumaki of the past. See how it's divided into these sections? Jiraiya pointed to several different areas of the circular seal, all of which looked like slices of pie. Naruto nodded in what Jiraiya was calling his learning mode. Quiet, attentive, and focused. Each section is actually a storage seal, and therefore each has its own separate formula that can be used to open it. So that means you can store multiple types of things? Naruto finished in question. But why not just seal everything in one formula and just pull out what you want? Good question, Naruto. There are different seals that work better for different things. A regular storage scroll will only hold so much, so you can use a different version to hold larger or more items. Some things deteriorate over time, so they need a stasis storage seal. In this case, it's most likely because sealing other scrolls with seals on them requires a special formula, as well as separating items by category so that if the person meant to open it doesn't know what's in it, he or she doesn't have to unseal every single thing at once. Jiraiya finished explaining. So basically for organization or specific needs. The young blonde tried to summarize. That's the gist of it. We can get into it deeper if you choose to learn more Fuinjutsu in the future, the Toad Sage told him. Now, let's start with the section in the 12 o'clock position. You should recognize the matrix for opening it if you look closely. Jiraiya had spent some time over the last couple of days explaining the basic terminology of Fuinjutsu. Seals were made up of sealing formulas. Formulas are made of matrices, which dictate what the seals do. Extremely basic as there were more than a dozen more terms and exceptions to rules and whatnot. But the almost 8-year-old was nowhere near ready to handle all that. Naruto eyed the formula closely and found what he was looking for. Using a fraction of the chakra he had the very first time, he channeled some into the matrix and heard the telltale pop and poof of smoke and found books. Maybe being in a clan isn't all that it's cracked up to be, he thought. He immediately tried to move on to the next section of sealing formula, but Jiraiya stopped him. Whoa, slow your roll there, Gaki. Aren't you going to even look at those books? Naruto grumbled back. I hate books. They're dumb. Listen, Naruto, I know they're not as exciting as jutsu, but those could be really important to your clan history. Hell, they might even contain some jutsu in them. Jiraiya exclaimed. This time Naruto's grumbles couldn't even be picked up by Jiraiya's enhanced hearing. What was that, kid? Naruto turned on him and yelled, I can't read, okay? Nobody ever taught me. He hung his head in shame. He didn't like talking about it. The last time he had brought it up, his first academy teacher had ignored him, and the entire class had made fun of him nonstop for it. What do you mean you can't read? You read the Hokage's letter just now, didn't you? The Sannin questioned. I know how to read some stuff, and Gigi knows which words I know well enough to piece together what he's saying, but most books are way too hard for me, and it takes forever. He grumbled, still looking down at the ground. Jiraiya took a deep breath, trying to quell the thoughts of murder running through his head. Sensei knew he couldn't read properly, and still did nothing about it. Unacceptable in Jiraiya's mind. Well then let's fix that. What kind of sensei would I be if I didn't help you learn? Besides, if I teach you now, I won't have to explain as much later on. Less work for me. Jiraiya gave the boy a smile, trying to cover up his anger. Naruto wasn't experienced enough to read Jiraiya's true feelings, so all he saw was his sensei offering to help him and smiling at him. Naruto smiled back. Okay, geezer, but you can't make me enjoy reading. He shot back softly. I wouldn't dare to even try, Naruto. Jiraiya chuckled back at him. With that, the two continued opening the sections, Jiraiya explaining what each was. Wholesome moment from last chapter. A large man walked into the shop, followed by a much smaller blonde child. The larger of the two was obviously a shinobi given the head protector, although the tailor had never heard of an oil village. We need some new rags for my companion here. The white-haired man gestured to the small child, whose nose was buried in a book. The boy was wearing what appeared to be very dirty blue sweatpants, with a green long-sleeve shirt that had a white shirt over the top of it. As the tailor took in the boy, subconsciously measuring him with his eyes, the young blonde's face twisted in confusion and perhaps frustration and tugged on his large companion's sleeve. When he had the shinobi's attention, He pointed to a word in the book and quirked his head. Indomitable. Do you know what that means? The boy quirked his head the other way, apparently in thought, and after a few seconds of pondering, nodded his head with a small smile. So what were we thinking? Training gear, perhaps? The tailor guessed based off of the boy's appearance and apparent shinobi father. What do you think, Naruto? The boy looked back up at Jiraiya, and then smiled such a warm, blindingly big smile that the tailor couldn't help but smile himself. 8 months after Naruto left Konoha, Naruto was interrupted from practicing his calligraphy when Jiraiya came into the clearing. He hated practicing calligraphy, but he wasn't thinking of that now. Something was wrong. Jiraiya had never moved that urgently since Naruto had left Konoha with him, least of all in their spars. Jiraiya was moving about camp busily packing things up. He stopped and shook his head like he was disappointed in himself, and made 3 shadow clones to continue his work. He turned to Naruto. An urgent matter has come up at the village. I have to go back, and fast. You won't be able to keep up with me, but I have a solution for that. Naruto saw the worried look on his master's face and decided it wasn't the time for his newest nickname. Sensei, what's wrong? Is the village okay? Jiraiya didn't know what to say. He couldn't tell a boy who'd only turned 8 for a few months that an entire clan had just been wiped out. They hadn't even addressed the fact that as a shinobi he would one day have to take a life. More than a couple if he ended up being any good. Just clan business. Nothing you need to worry about, kiddo. I thought you didn't have a clan? Naruto asked curiously. I don't. It's not my clan business. But you know, as the Hokage's student, he sometimes recalls me to advise him on important matters. Jiraiya said with as much bravado as he could muster. He was trying to keep the boy innocent as long as possible. If you say so. Don't expect me to have you as an advisor when I'm Hokage just because you were my sensei, though. You'll have to earn that position fair and square. Naruto retorted. Jiraiya gave him a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, a feeble attempt at hiding his emotional state. Naruto wasn't even a genin, and yet his eyes narrowed as he noticed yet again that something was wrong with his sensei. So what am I going to do while you're gone? And how long will you be gone? And are you sure I'm not fast enough to keep up with you? The young blonde questioned. Yes, I'm positive, and it'll be another 30 years before you can catch me if you don't start working harder. A sensei was a sensei, and therefore Jiraiya was always trying to keep the boy motivated. He wanted to tell him about his father as soon as possible, but he had to get stronger and more mature first, something training hard would accomplish. How would you like to become a toad summoner? He asked before Naruto could argue that he was training harder than anybody, especially Sasuke, that jerk. Whoa, you mean I'll be able to summon Gamma? Or Giratora? Naruto asked in awe and wonderment. Not just those 2 Gaki, but any of the toads. One's the size of small mountains, or one strong enough lift a stone 50 times their size. Jiraiya's mood picked up momentarily. He couldn't help it. Toads were awesome. Whoa, how do I do it? How do I do it? Show me the hand signs again. Naruto was beyond excited, Jiraiya's odd mood completely forgotten. All right, kiddo. Here are the signs, but don't use them yet. You have to sign the contract first. Jiraiya bit his thumb and wet the end of each finger with the blood it produced. One of the conditions of the summoning jutsu is that it requires a small blood sacrifice each time it is used. He began going through the hand signs slowly, while saying them out loud for Naruto's benefit. Boar, dog, bird, monkey, ram, Kuchios no Jutsu, summoning technique. A now familiar puff of smoke in the air, and soon Gamma was standing before Naruto, a green and red scroll wrapped up in its tongue. Jiraiya grabbed the scroll when Gamma unfurled it out to him, and he unrolled the scroll on the ground. There were names written on the scroll in typical vertical fashion, in what looked like blood. Below the names were fingerprints, also in blood. Naruto, being the sharp kunai that he was, didn't even wait for Jiraiya to explain. He just bit down on his thumb and began writing his name in the blood he produced, in remarkably good handwriting for a child his age. When he was done, he bloodied all 5 fingers on his right hand and left a print, just like the others had. Congratulations, Gaki. You now have one more thing in common with the 4th Hokage, to go with your looks and sensei. Jiraiya had explained that he looked a bit like the 4th, and that's one of the main reasons that Jiraiya had taken an interest in him, so this made sense. Wait a minute. No, it didn't. Wait, you're telling me. The Yondaime was a toad summoner too? And now I am. Why Naruto was shocked was beyond Jiraiya. The boy already knew he had trained him. It shouldn't have been that hard to put two and two together. He guessed Naruto still had a way to go intelligence-wise, despite his newfound interest in books. Yes, Gaki, I was his sensei, remember? I gave him the toad summoning contract, with the toad's permission, of course. They have also given me permission to allow you to sign it, though we won't have time to train in it. I've got to get going. Jiraiya finished. Wait, what am I going to do then? Naruto had never had his question answered. Jiraiya had just offered him the contract. You are going to MT Mayaboku. It's the ancient and sacred home of the toads. Jiraiya explained, before turning to a large orange toad. Gamma, please report back to Fukasaku and Shima, and please tell them to reverse summon Naruto and I. Jiraiya asked. The toad croaked and vanished in a puff of smoke. If this MT Mayabarno. Mayaboku. That's what I said. Naruto growled back. If this MT Mayaboku place is so sacred and great, how come I've never heard of it? The blonde questioned petulantly. Sacred means that it's a place of great meaning to the toads. Therefore, very few people are ever allowed to visit their home, and that means very few people even know of its existence. I'm the only one alive that's been, and I can only think of 3 other people that even know of its existence. Jiraiya offered. Naruto nodded. So how do we get there? You said something about inverted summoning or something. Reverse summoning. Jiraiya corrected again. When you have a summoning contract signed in blood, if the summon is strong enough, they can reverse summon you to their home, just as you can summon them. Is it gonna hurt? What happens if they summon you when you're naked? In the show, there was a puff of smoke, and the curious blonde disappeared. Nobody was there to witness it, though, as the toad sage was reverse summoned at the exact same time. MT Mayaboku, home of the toad summons. What the hell was that, old man? Naruto screamed, rubbing his butt, which he had promptly fell on after his first experience with a space-time ninjutsu. Yes, he does seem to have quite a bit of fire in him, just like his mother did. He sure does, Pa, he sure does. Jiraiya replied sadly. Naruto, come here. I want to introduce you to Ma and Pa Fukasaku-sama, Shima-sama. This is Naruto, my new student. Naruto looked down at the 2 tiny, wrinkled toads standing next to Jiraiya. Or were they sitting? He couldn't really tell because of how small they were and the overcoats that they wore. Hiya Fukasaku-sama, Shima-sama. Naruto waved awkwardly. Gaki, it's Fukasaku, not Fukasaku. They're both sages. Have some respect. Jiraiya corrected with a facepalm. Oh, who cares, Jiraiya boy? Naruto boy, it's so good to finally meet you. Jiraiya has sent a few messages about you, and that got us quite excited to meet our newest summoner. Fukasaku said. It's great to meet you too, Grandpa Sage. Naruto said with a smile. Naruto, respect. Jiraiya was exasperated. He didn't have time for this. Oh, whatever, pervy sage. Naruto hollered with an accusational point, including his newest nickname for his sensei. If you're a sage, then it must not be that special, you old pervert. Naruto finished yelling. Oh, I like him. Fukasaku and Shima said in unison. He caught me doing research one time, and now he won't stop calling me that nickname. Jiraiya lamented. That's very funny, Naruto boy, but I assure you the power of a sage is no joke. Fukasaku explained while walking over to a giant stone toad statue. Wait, power? You mean being a sage isn't just about pretending to be all wise? Naruto questioned. Jiraiya, what have you been teaching the boy? Hopefully not just how to peek on women's baths. Shima called out. You're half right, Naruto boy. Sages like us are incredibly wise, and should you ever need counsel, we would be happy to help you. However, we are also incredibly powerful. Observe. Fukasaku clapped his hands together and became unnaturally still for a moment. Then he pulled his hands apart and gripped the foot of the toad stone. It was at least 30 times his size, yet the wrinkly toad lifted it above his head like Naruto would lift a scroll. Extreme ease. Naruto didn't see any difference in the old toad after he clapped his hands together, but when he was done, he had felt powerful. Like way more powerful. Naruto's eyes were still wide in awe. You have got to teach me that. I could kick that bastard Sasuke's ass so easily with that. Language. Whatever, pervy sage, you know it's true. Please teach me that Grandpa Sage. Sorry, lad, you're too young for it, and your body wouldn't be able to take the strain the technique would put on it. When you are properly developed, though, I would be more than happy to teach you. Really? That's great, Naruto shouted. Is there anything else you can teach me in the meantime? Before either of the elder toads could answer that, Jiraiya cut in. Naruto, focus up real quick. And just like that, Naruto's blue eyes were locked on to his in complete focus. Jiraiya was no longer taken aback by the intensity of his student, but sometimes he forgot just how intensely focused he could get when need be. I have to go deal with the village emergency. I'll probably be gone around a month. Ma and Pa will take care of you in the meantime, and I'm sure they'll help you continue your training if you're respectful of them and their home. The two elder toads nodded at this. There was a flash of something in the boy's eyes. Something sad. It happened so quick, Jiraiya wasn't even 100% sure he actually saw it before they returned back to their normal glow. All right, pervy sage, I bet by the time you get back I'll be able to kick your butt too, Naruto shouted. Jiraiya gave Naruto one final genuine smile before shining, body flickering, away. So Naruto, you seem to get along well with Jiraiya if your getup is any indication, Shima said. Naruto looked down at his outfit. The nice tailor in River Country had gladly made him a copy of Jiraiya's gear with some small exceptions. He wore the green robe jacket and green shinobi pants that were loose and tied up just below the knee just like him, as well as the mesh armor underneath and the green guards for the back of his hands. Instead of a red kabuki jacket with yellow circles on the shoulders, Naruto wore a blue one with red Uzumaki clan crests sewed on in place of the circles. He also wore blue wooden geta on his feet instead of red like Jiraiya's, though he still had a little bit of trouble moving in them and struggled to water walk with them on. Rounding out the outfit was a large blue and red scroll strapped to his back, just like Jiraiya's, though Naruto's was red with blue ends and extra seals running across the middle, courtesy of Jiraiya. The boy had even taken to putting small red streaks running from his eyes, though his were much shorter than Jiraiya's, barely making it onto his cheek. In addition to all this, the young blonde was growing out his hair to be like Jiraiya's. It was longer than it had ever been, and he had taken to tying shinobi cloth around his forehead to keep it out of his eyes. It wasn't long enough for a ponytail like Jiraiya's, but he was determined to get it there. Naruto smiled at two toad elders. I sure do. Even if he is a pervert and super stubborn. I still need a headband like his so I can match him completely though. Naruto's face dropped for a second at this. You know, Naruto boy, we toads are the ones who gave that to Jiraiya boy. The kanji on the front means oil and is the symbol of our clan. Fukasaku informed him kindly, and being that you are our newest summoner, I'd say you deserve the opportunity to earn one yourself, don't you think? Naruto nodded his head vigorously. He really wanted that headband. What do I gotta go, Grandpa Sage? Walk on water? Beat you in a fight? Naruto thought for a second about other ways he could earn the headband before speaking excitedly. I can make a bunch of clones and do the dishes. Jiraiya has me do that all the time before he teaches me something. Naruto rushed out. Actually, that does sound kind of nice. It's AD. Fukasaku was interrupted by a smack on the back of his head, courtesy of his wife. She was not letting him shirk dishes duty again. Oh, that's right, the oath. In order to become a true summoner, you must take an oath never to put the Toad clan in harm's way if possible, and treat all summons as equals. In order to earn the headband, you must take the oath and learn every Toad's name in the clan. Fukasaku explained after his wife's beaten correction, after his wife's loving correction. I'm not great with names, but oaths I can do. Naruto stopped short. Oh, what's an oath? Naruto asked timidly. Why, an oath is just a promise, but more serious. There are consequences if you don't take the oath seriously, or if you break it. Do you think you can take this seriously, Naruto boy? Fukasaku explained and then asked. Of course I can. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, future Hokage of the village hidden in the leaves, and I never break a promise, you know. Naruto shouted at the top of his 8-year-old lungs. Oh ho, well Naruto, recite this oath. I, Naruto Uzumaki, summoner of the Great Toad Clan, swear to never do harm to a toad or put them in unnecessary danger without their permission. I also swear to come to the Toad clans or any member's aid whenever the need should arise. Naruto nodded. The determination that Jiraiya wrote about shining in his eyes for the elder toads to see. I, Naruto Uzumaki, summoner of the Great Toad Clan, swear to never do harm to a toad or put them in unnecessary danger without their permission. I also swear to come to the Toad clans or any member's aid whenever the need should arise, and to become the greatest toad summoner to ever live. And I swear it on my title of future Hokage. There was a fire lit inside the boy, and though it wasn't tangible, Fukasaku and Shima could feel it. Every toad in on the mountain could probably feel it radiating off of him. The two elders believed the boy, and believed that he might just be the child of prophecy. All right, Naruto boy, very well said. Now let's go get you some food and introduce you to all of our kin, Shima said. Naruto seemed excited at the prospect of food, though he didn't know that it would consist mostly of bugs. He was more excited to get to know the names of all the toads and get that sweet horned headband Pervy Sage had on, though. Jiraiya walked up to the Hokage Tower under the cover of night. He had never, in all his years as a shinobi of the Great Leaf, entered through the front door of this building. Not even when he was a genin getting his first D-rank missions. Sarutobi had already been the Hokage at the time, so he would always try and sneak through the window to surprise his sensei, and his sensei would always acknowledge his presence without even turning to look. Considering what had happened, though, Jiraiya thought it best not to test any of the ANBU's frayed nerves. After all, it had been one of them that had done the deed. No, he'd better walk through the front door tonight, and slowly at that. So that is what Jiraiya did, acknowledging the ANBU sentries that were out in the open and ignoring the ones that were hidden. Up to the top of the building he went, never being stopped by anybody, as access to the tower was restricted right now, and everybody in there knew Jiraiya had been summoned by his sensei. He came to the double doors of the Hokage's office, took a deep breath, and pushed his way in. Jiraiya, sit. Jiraiya remained standing. Did he really kill every last one of them? Even his family? While the Uchiha clan were technically all related at least distantly, Sarutobi knew what he meant. No, not all of them. He left his little brother, Sasuke. Jiraiya just looked at his sensei blankly. Not even two great shinobi wars and decades out in the field, both in combat missions, and as a spy, could prepare him for this. How was he going to explain to Naruto that the boy he always mentioned as a rival and somebody he wanted to beat would never be the same? Then again, Sasuke was currently experiencing what Naruto had for the first 7 years of his life. Loneliness. All alone, at the ripe old age of 8. Even Tsunade had made it to 27 before she lost everybody that she had loved. The boy was going to be messed up if somebody didn't help him. How is the boy doing? Jiraiya asked softly. Sarutobi was surprised by this. The village was in great danger. So soon after the Third Great Shinobi War, they experienced the Kyuubi attack and loss of their greatest hero. Now, so soon after that hit to their morale and numbers, they lost an entire clan, possibly their most powerful clan. The village was reeling, and Iwa, Stone Village, and Kumo, Cloud Village, would be looking to take advantage of it. Not to mention that their treaty with Suna, Sand Village, was shaky on the best of days. Sure, they had avoided a potential civil war as the Uchiha coup died with its members, but that didn't mean they weren't greatly weakened. Yet, here was Jiraiya, his last true confidant, and perhaps most trusted advisor, worried about a boy who wasn't strong enough to take on a genin yet. But Jiraiya had spent the last 8 months in Naruto's presence, day after day. No doubt that had influenced him strongly. Sarutobi swore the boy had a superpower, even amongst chakra-wielding shinobi. He has just woken up. He's still in the hospital. It appears that Itachi put him under a jinjutsu before he left. The Sandaime explained, though it appears he knows what happened, he won't talk to anybody about it. And I'm hesitant to call Inoichi in for a mind walk, as fragile as the boy's mental state is at the moment. Jiraiya growled at this, and the fatherly instinct that he would deny he had kicked in. Did it have to be this way? He spat out. Sarutobi took a second, considering what he would say next. It appears they were going to use Naruto for their plan, or rather, the Kyuubi within him. Sarutobi treaded carefully. We don't know what they would have done if they couldn't find him. I'd taken to sending a hinged, transformed clone in the form of Naruto out now, and then so nobody would suspect he was out of the village. The Hokage's voice started to break. The looks my clone got. The treatment it received in place of Naruto. He shook his head. The wise Hokage had no words for it. Jiraiya considered this. He knew his sensei felt bad about Naruto's treatment, about his isolation. It couldn't happen again. Anybody other than Naruto, with his indomitable will, would have folded in a few months at best. It couldn't happen again. Somebody needs to take care of the boy. We cannot let him live in isolation. Jiraiya spoke so quietly even an elite jonin likely wouldn't have been able to hear him. Sarutobi did. Who? Jiraiya was silent. When Hiruzen looked up, he found his student's eyes staring into his intensely. And then the question was asked. The question Jiraiya dreaded, but brought onto himself. The question he wanted asked, and so desperately didn't. Are you volunteering, Jiraiya? The Hokage stuttered out. Jiraiya didn't answer for a while. A long while. Only for a short while. I can't take care of them both forever. I can take him long enough for the village to get over the massacre, at least a little bit, so that he won't be such an outlier. Then he can come back, and someone else can take care of him. A few months tops. It'll be good for Naruto. Jiraiya was already regretting the words. He could barely take care of Naruto. The boy hadn't brushed his teeth for the first 2 weeks because Jiraiya hadn't told him to, and he forgot that young boys needed to be reminded. But he couldn't let it happen again. Not like it did to Naruto. He knew it would be the polar opposite. Naruto was hated for what he carried. Sasuke would be loved for the potential that he carried, or more likely, the potential that his eyes carried. They would both be ostracized for the power they carried within, and he could stop it, at least the worst of it. If he took on Sasuke for a little while, he wouldn't hear the whispers about the massacre every day for the next few months while it was still the talk of the village. He wouldn't be bombarded with questions and looks as he walked down the street. He wouldn't be treated differently just because something a family member of his did that affected him. Maybe Naruto would be good for the boy. Lord knows Sasuke will be good for Naruto. Jiraiya had made up his mind, whether he liked it or not. I promised Itachi K that I would keep Sasuke safe, that he would have a chance to grow up here with an unblemished name. Sarutobi responded. He will. He just needs time away from the village. From the people of it, both alive and dead, and the memories they bring. Sarutobi couldn't deny that. Hell, he'd let his own student leave to drown at the memories the village brought up of lost loved ones. Who was he to deny a child the same right, though with different methods hopefully? Very well. For months, tops. In that time I will arrange for another caretaker and place of living for him. The Hokage said. Kakashi. Jiraiya responded. You want Kakashi to take care of the boy? He can barely take care of himself at the moment. All he does is take missions and recklessly train until he drops. No, he would be a horrible caretaker. He needs to talk to the boy though. It'll be good for both of them. I believe Kakashi was Itachi's captain before he was promoted himself. Sasuke will need to talk about it with somebody who he can relate to, even just a little bit. Jiraiya explained. It was only during times like this that Hiruzen didn't question his student's title as a sage. Despite his childishness and antics, he could occasionally spout wisdom even better than the Hokage himself could. That plan is sound. Sarutobi said, there is an issue with you taking Sasuke-kun though. He explained, you know that we must present a strong front, so you will need to take on missions. Dangerous missions, in dangerous places, to show that we aren't hurting from our diminished forces. I'm well aware. I have a plan for that. Naruto is currently at MT Miyaboku with the Toads. I believe, given the extenuating circumstances, that the Toads will allow a non-summoner on their sacred grounds. I'll take Sasuke there to stay with Naruto. It will be good for both of them to be away from people for a while. The Toads can also summon and reverse summon me, so I can visit sporadically to check up, without losing ground on my missions. Sarutobi nodded at this. It was a good plan, keeping Sasuke away from the rumors and gossip, however short it might be. All right, Jiraiya, I will put my faith in you, seeing as I have already failed this village more times than I can count. Take the boy, help him as best you can, and then return for your missions. Sarutobi said, it has already been a week since the massacre. I expect that in another week most other villages will know. So I expect you back and out on a mission before then. The Hokage finished. Jiraiya nodded, and then moved to leave through the window. Nobody would feel threatened by somebody leaving the Hokage tower after all. He opened the window, but before he could leap out of it, Hiruzen stopped him. Jiraiya, thank you. I know you have no wish to take my place, but you are doing a great job making decisions, hard decisions, selfless decisions, that only help others from Konoha and not yourself. The way I see it, you are our shadow Hokage. I rule in the light for all to see within the village, but ever since Minato died, you have taken care of the things that aren't seen by the villagers. Do the things that must be done to help in the long run, even if you're the only person who can truly see that at the time. Thank you for your service, the sensei of the Sannin said. Jiraiya didn't turn around, and he didn't need to. Sensei knew him better than anybody else at this point. He nodded ever so slightly, and then took off again. Sasuke didn't know where they were exactly. Jiraiya-sama had said that he was taking him somewhere safe to be with a friend. When he arrived at the colorful mountainside village, he didn't see any friends, just the annoying blonde dead lass that had left his academy class a while ago. Pervy Sage, what's he doing here? Naruto's tone was accusational. The old man knew he didn't like Sasuke, that he was his rival. You didn't let him sign the summoning contract, did you? No way I'm sharing with that bastard, Naruto shouted. Jiraiya sighed. It seemed one whole day with the toads wasn't enough to teach him some respect. Oh well, Naruto, language. And no, Sasuke won't be signing the toad contract. He's just gonna stay here with you for a few months while I take care of some dangerous missions for the village. Too dangerous for a couple of 8-year-olds, sorry. Jiraiya cut off Naruto's train of thought before it could even get going. Naruto hated this, hated that stupid Sasuke with his stoic-looking face, though he had improved greatly in the last 8 months. Plus, he had his shadow clone jutsu, so he could beat the jerk up 10 times at once. His internal evil laugh could almost be seen by Jiraiya as he worked out Naruto's thought procession, though Sasuke just looked confused, as well as he hid it from his face. Fine, old man, but you owe me a new jutsu for this. I want to learn the hair one. Naruto finally shouted at his sensei. Very well, Naruto. I'll teach you the hair one when I come back for good in a few months. I'll be stopping by every now and then to check up on you guys. Jiraiya turned to Sasuke. You're more than welcome to join Naruto in his training while you're here, or you can just laze around and do whatever pleases you. If you need anything, just ask one of the toads. They'll all help you or find one that will for you. Jiraiya explained softly. He hated to leave the boy alone after such a tragic incident, but it was better than being alone in the village. In truth, he was hoping Naruto would spin some of that fiery magic within him and help Sasuke through this tough time. The boy had a way of giving people hope when all had felt lost. Jiraiya left with a call of "be good" over his shoulder that was directed at a certain blonde more than the black-haired child. Naruto stuck out his tongue and looked at Sasuke. Really looked at Sasuke, for the first time since he left the village, or maybe ever, he thought to himself. The small Uchiha wore a stoic expression like always, face perfectly masked, just as he'd been taught. Naruto saw the truth though, saw it in his eyes. Sadness. Naruto's own facial expression softened. What happened? He inquired. Sasuke felt betrayed by Jiraiya-sama, who assured him he wouldn't tell Naruto what was going on. He had seen their interaction though, unless they knew some sort of secret code, which he didn't think Naruto capable of learning. The Sannin hadn't said a word. Sasuke grunted. He had been doing that for a week now, but it had worked to get the adults to leave him alone and stop asking him how he was doing. Well, what the hell does that mean? Did you forget how to talk? Or are you just shocked by my pure awesomeness? Naruto questioned brashly. Sasuke was surprised by this. The adults had all left him alone when he did that, as obvious as it was that he didn't want to talk. Maybe the blonde was too dumb to understand. It means I don't want to speak with you, Sasuke said shortly. Why not? Naruto asked back. The question was genuine, and to Sasuke, it didn't just seem like it was out of curiosity. For some reason it felt like Naruto actually cared about him. I don't wish to talk about what happened, Sasuke said, then lowered his eyes and quickly finished, it's too hard. Naruto knew that look. He knew questioning wouldn't help anymore. Okay, well, what do you want to do? He asked. Sasuke was surprised again. Nobody had asked him what he wanted. Sure, they had all wanted to help, but they wanted to do it their way. After a few seconds of thinking, he replied, I want to get stronger. Naruto smiled at that. He understood that. He didn't know Sasuke's reasoning, but he didn't have to. They had the same goal, and that was all that mattered. All right, well, let's start training then. Come on, Grandpa Toad Sage will help us. He's super strong. Naruto grabbed Sasuke by the wrist and took off running towards Fukasaku, who was seated on a toad statue a couple 100 feet away. Sasuke didn't even have time to call Naruto a loser before his wrist was grabbed and he was yanked away. He didn't feel like fighting him either. It felt like too much work after all he had been through. So he just let the blonde drag him. He'd get him back for it later.